All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Carey with Church of the Eternal Logos. And tonight, we're going to be looking at the spiritual battle of global tyranny and reviewing a recent conversation between Tucker Carlson and Russel Brand. Why, you may ask? Well, I think it's interesting because I actually did a stream, I think it was a year or 2 years ago, critiquing the spiritual worldview of Russel Brand. It was about the time he started to kind of get into conspiracies. It was before he got deplatformed and went over to Rumble. And so during that point, I highlighted about, again, it's sort of new age, spiritual but not religious worldview, and highlighted that many of the things he, in fact, believed was actually part and parcel of the system he was beginning to wake up to. And more recently, people have been speculating, is Russel Brand becoming Christian? He's been making a few comments about Christ, about reading scripture, about Christianity as a religion. And this particular conversation with Tucker Carlson, I think, is really interesting because he makes a definitive claim towards the end of the stream that says, "You are not God. You are not God." Now, this is very contradictory to the stream I did a couple years ago, in which he very much was in that new age worldview where you sort of are your own God and you create your own world. And again, divinity is consciousness and all this different stuff. So today, what we're going to do is I wanted to kind of lay out what exactly this global spiritual battle is, and then assess Russel Brand. Again, is he Christian? I'll give you my definitive opinion here in a few minutes, but watch a few clips and then we're going to get into the interview. And for those of you who aren't aware, Tucker Carlson is recently, or he may be back or still in Moscow, Russia. He's doing an interview with Vladimir Putin, big mean Vladdy himself. So I'm stoked for that because we're going to definitely be doing a stream review of that conversation. Natashki says, I don't trust either of these dudes. Well, I don't trust anybody but Christ. I don't even trust some of the hierarchs in the church. So I think at this point, you shouldn't really trust anybody because as we've seen, everybody seems to be compromised in one way or another, and we all fall short. We all fall short. So smash that like, guys. I want to give you a quick opening, and then I want to get into some of these videos. So first thing I want to say is, what is the spiritual battle, quote unquote, that is happening around the world? And I think what's happening, and I think this is going to be prevalent within the conversation between Russel Brand and Tucker Carlson, is people slowly waking up to the existence of evil, right? And I would argue that for many of us, this was part and parcel of our journey, that at some point, and I know this was true for me, at some point, so many of us actually come back to Christ, or what is often referred to as anatheism, or returning to God after God. So at some point, not everybody grows up in a religious household or exposed to Christianity, but many of us were. And then we sort of go on our prodigal journey, and then something we confront, something we experience, something we do, and eventually we see it's not jiving. And then we kind of discern we need to find new answers, and often come back to traditional religion, particularly Christianity, most specifically Orthodoxy. And I ask you guys, and feel free to leave in the comments or here in the chat, like, I would argue for many of us, there was a point in which we woke up to the fact that evil exists. There's something nefarious going on. And I remember for me, I was living in California, I was in Berkeley, starting my PhD program. I thought I was on top of the world. And it was right when the Milo Yiannopoulos and the Ben Shapiro speech happened, where the Berkeley professor literally beat a student in the head with a bike lock, of which the city dropped all charges. And obviously, he was not guilty or served any form of punishment for that act. But I'm in Berkeley. I viewed myself as sort of left of center, although, I was kind of thought Donald Trump was interesting. This was right when the Jordan Peterson phenomenon was happening. And I saw a pride parade happen in Berkeley, California, which is not unusual. And I saw people protesting for minor attracted persons, MAP, if you guys aren't familiar, which is pedos, adults that prefer intercourse or have sexual attractions towards children, minors. And when I saw that, I was quite alarmed. I mean, I thought I was, again, in the context of the Midwest. All my academic training was in the state of Indiana and the state of Illinois. Obviously, Illinois is very liberal with Chicago, but I was over at the University of Illinois. And from their perspective, because I was interested in psychedelics and all this different stuff, Gnosticism, I was kind of the radical one. And then I get placed into Berkeley and I realize I'm not radical at all. These people are radical and they're crazy. They're nuts. And I remember there was a vivid point, and I was like, this is evil. But I didn't like using, just like Russel Brand, I didn't like using the term evil. And I have a video in which he's asked about it. He's like, oh, no, I don't really believe in evil. But I remember uttering that phrase. I remember looking out and watching the protest, like, what is going on? And that was huge for me, because if there is evil, and this was also tied with my experience, as I've told you guys before, I went to a Gnostic mass. A Gnostic mass is part of a sort of ritualistic process within Thelema. And that I've talked about this. If you want to hear the full details, I have a video up on my website for members. But anyways, I kind of go to a Gnostic mass with other academics. You'd be surprised. Magic is probably the preeminent form of spirituality in Silicon Valley in the Bay Area. And it's not from low-rung people. I'm talking tech executives, very wealthy people are very much interested in magic, ritualistic magic. We're not talking about magic, the playing cards, or stage magic. And I remember going to this ritual at the time. Again, I was not Christian, promoting psychedelics, all this different stuff. And it ends, the Gnostic Mass, all Gnostic Masses typically end with a naked woman on the altar, of which people then go and they submit their desires by like making out with her or doing certain stuff. I just remember the ick. I got the ick from this experience. And I didn't feel comfortable. And I was like, these people were practicing and putting in action the things that I kind of nominally thought I believed. And this caused me to think, maybe there's something nefarious here. Maybe demons are real. Maybe darkness is a reality. Evil actually exists. And so that, I think, was a huge catalyst for me eventually coming back to Christ and wanting to clean myself up. And I think this is true for many people. And I think this is true with this sort of Christian traditional revivalism we're seeing, obviously, in Orthodoxy. Obviously, we're seeing it in the Catholic Church. But Protestantism is trying to wake up to it. Although I've said before, I think Protestantism is basically dead. I don't think it's going to really exist significantly in the next couple generations. And we had a Protestant at church. That's a bit of a side note today. And he's kind of getting into Orthodoxy. He's new. And I mentioned, tell me a Protestant nation that's still Christian. And he's like, well, Yeah, I can't really think of one. Exactly. Because Protestantism and its presuppositions have led to the detritus of the world that we live in, due to, again, presuppositions like sola scriptura, which leads into relativism, which leads into people having their own truth because, every pastor has their own interpretation. And so I think once we realize evil exists and once we start putting some dots together, it's by becoming Christ-like that we actually begin to fight back against this darkness. And that's that it's not an immediate connection, right? Because if you believe evil exists, well, then you got to go stamp out evil. Maybe you go on a crusade. Maybe you have to do something worldly to stop it. But really, I think the ultimate realization is that's not the way we move about it. And so, how does this global evil, which obviously we know that we're moving towards the Antichrist, we're moving towards a one world government, we're moving towards the destruction of, again, the good, the true, and the beautiful in many ways. How exactly do they attack us? And I would argue they attack us in a multitude of ways. Number one, and we're going to hit on a few, and these will come up in the conversation that we go over today. But how does the global elite attack us? How does the evil one attack us? Moving through, again, the media, economic systems, our national governments, even maybe people close to us. I have a series, and that's not in a particular order, but the first one I have is obviously lies and propaganda. And Russel Brand, he's going to be mentioned. Again, he was accused of like sexual assault and rape and all this different stuff, although by unknown anonymous accusers, which is very interesting. Again, I don't know if you guys have been following, but Vince McMahon of the WWE, who's a billionaire, is now being labeled as a sex trafficker. I find that hard to believe, but we know that the system will label you as something. We know that we're inundated with lies. We know that the Bidenomics, right here in the U.S., again, wherever you guys are in the world, here in the U.S., they're literally telling us inflation is over. The economy is doing phenomenally. It's Biden created more jobs than anybody. It's all lies. Everything is a lie. Our health system is there to make us fat and unhealthy. Big Pharma is there to get you addicted and make money off you. I mean, look at the phenomenon of Ozempic. Have you guys been following this? Ozempic is basically a weight loss drug. I saw Oprah Winfrey literally apologize for her decade-long relationship with Weight Watchers, telling women to get active, watch your diet, lose weight, live a healthy lifestyle, to Weight Watchers and Oprah and all these different people now officially telling people just get on Ozempic. And Ozempic is this drug that basically paralyzes your stomach so that you don't have a desire to eat, but it can have serious, serious consequences, of which we're seeing. And I saw one person talk that many people who are taking Ozempic, which is supposed to be a lifetime drug. Oh, perfect, right? A lifetime drug. Meanwhile, this drug being made in Europe is banned in Europe, yet their target market is the United States, of which we are absolutely fat and overweight. You can't go to a Walmart, you can't go to a supermarket in the US without looking around and saying, oh my gosh, we are so fat, morbidly fat and obese in this country. It's disgusting. And so, of course, I think something I saw was like over 70% or 70% of Americans are technically overweight. And so they market this drug to us. Why? To get us to make money off us. And they lie about it. They lie about the long-term consequences. And so we look at how they're attacking us. Lies and propaganda is first and foremost. And we have to realize that, again, that is a spiritual battle, because lies come from the evil one. He is the father of lies. Satan is the ultimate liar. And when we look at any media system, I mean, look at journalists. Show me a journalist that actually is doing journalism. I mean, Whitney Webb is about one of the few. And so we're being attacked because there's nothing truthful to believe in, which again brings us back to Christ, because truth is a who, not a what. This is, again, realizing the spiritual battle we're in. Everything is a lie. Everything is propaganda, be it Ukraine, Russia, be it Israel, Gaza. I mean, this is where, again, Elon Musk, right? He's a savior of free speech, although he still bans people and limits free speech on X. Oh, and then he also wants to put microchips in your head. And then he also wants to tell you that Israel is the good guy, even though they've killed over 13,000 children. And the international court system has basically found Netanyahu guilty of war crimes. Oh, no, it's all lies. It's all lies. Another point is demoralization. And I mean demoralization both in the moral sense and also in despair. So the ways that we're being attacked right now, this is why Joe Biden is the president of the United States. It's to cause despair. It's to humiliate. It's to demoralize. And of course, this is tied with the demoralization of just the absence of morality in the West. I mean, you show me where exactly is anything moral being promoted. It's about promiscuity. It's about cutting your genitals off, inverting genitals, putting children on puberty blockers. Did you guys see the father in New York who just went to court because his wife began dressing his son at the age of 3 in dresses, and now the little boy's like 6 years old, 5 or 6 years old, and the wife is beginning to put him on puberty blockers, of which he most likely will be sterile permanently for the rest of his life. The father went to court saying that the mother doesn't have a right to do that, and they denied him. They denied him. Everything in our country is a form of demoralization. For example, the mass immigration. We know that we have an open southern border, and what they're doing now is there's a proposal to give them like $53 million. Meanwhile, in the same city of New York, there is a 94-year-old veteran from the Korean War who is in a nursing home who is told that he has to leave to make more room for migrants. They literally put a veteran in his late 90s or mid 90s out on the street. This was like news. They were interviewing him. This is about a demoralization. This is about to destroy any hope yet you have for the future, which again, Christ is the hope. Christ and God is our sense of morals. And so we see the absolute undermining of morality, and we see a growth in despair. What's the leading cause of men in the United States? It's fentanyl use and suicide. A significant swath of American men are dead because, as we'll get to the next one, addiction. The goal of this evil system, the goal of this global system is to get you addicted to something in many different ways, and it's not just drugs. But look at the fentanyl. They're allowing fentanyl to come across the border. In Canada, they're trying to give fentanyl to children. I shit you not. I am not kidding. If you put in fentanyl given to children without parents' permission in Canada, you will see that is happening in British Columbia. Why? Because this is a spiritual battle. And this is about the demoralization, and this is about causing further and further despair so that you have no hope and you will acquiesce. The next point I had was addiction. And it's not just drugs, although we see drug addiction going rampant in the West. But it's addiction to pleasure. It's addiction to oneself, which is the recapitulation of the fall of Lucifer as Satan, is that the only thing you care about, the only thing you ultimately worship is yourself. And we'll see with Russel Brand, he's come to the realization that suffering and sacrifice are actually the catalyst for his own spiritual progression. Very different than what the world often tells us, is that we need to seek happiness. We need to be happy. We need to find pleasure. Have as much promiscuous sex, take as many drugs, have as many experiences as you can. This is what's going to make you happy and more fulfilled. No, it's the exact opposite. And so addiction is another way in which this global tyranny is trying to attack you. And this is a spiritual battle. We all fall short. We all have temptations. And when we engage in those temptations, that it's so easy to continue that process. It's like a domino effect. But that's, again, why we have Christ. We repent. We stand back up and we try to do better. Scapegoating others is another way in which this system tries to alleviate the sense of responsibility, right? Responsibility is something that empowers us and allows us to become more like Christ. But again, in the West, what they're trying to do is always give you somebody to scapegoat. This is a sort of Marxist dialectics, looking at everything in regards to power dynamics. And we have to see this is another form of attack, because the ultimate way to move forward is to take more responsibility and figure out where we're falling short. And you look at the people out there that are protesting, that are making the most noise in society, and they're often the most erratic. They have the most screwed up lives. They're the ones that won't take responsibility for everything. The reason why they have, blue hair and a nose ring that looks like a bull is because, their mom was mean to them or their dad was harsh to them. I mean, what? We got to grow up. But the scapegoating fails to make you responsible for your own actions, which then leads into you never growing up, which is a sort of neoteny, a sort of adolescence. Neoteny is the retention of juvenile characteristics into adulthood, and that is the state of the world that we live in. Another one is attack of the nuclear family. Nobody in the Western world, I don't care if you're in Europe or North America, nobody can say that these governments are in active support of the family. And that's both the extended family, which obviously I'm in celebration of, I'm in support of, but obviously too the nuclear family. That's why they want to invert the gender dynamics, which is another one that I have. Destroying gender roles. You destroy the gender roles, you'll destroy the nuclear family, you'll make sure that you have less children because the spiritual battle is against life. It's against life. It's trying to kill you. It wants you and your children to die. That's why they're trying to legalize euthanasia in Canada for children. I shit you not. And, in Canada, they won't even release the data on their euthanasia program. They won't even tell people who's actually signing up and who's doing it. Interesting. Lack of transparency. So the attack on the nuclear family, we have to realize, is a point in which this spiritual battle is being waged. And that's why so many of us, be it male or female, once you have children, once you have a family, you begin to ask deeper questions. I have seen so many people in my life, and I don't mean just Orthodox or Christian, just friends that I know, that once they had children, once they had somebody to protect, once they saw the innocence of a child, once they saw that they can curate this person by protecting them from the evils of the world, it changed them in a beneficial way. And we're going to see this is also true for Russel Brand, that his son, he had a young son, and he had to have heart surgery. And because he had to have heart surgery, it caused him to, again, to feel powerless and begin to view the world in a different way. And so the attack on the family is an attack on life. It's an attack on things that force us to grow up. It's an attack on that which forces us to mature and take responsibility and care for something more than ourselves, which again is Christ-like. When our focus isn't just ourself, our own pleasure, our own satisfaction, but it's actually somebody else, we grow in return. And so desecrating our bodies is another way that they're attacking us. I mean, again, the transgender issue, the puberty blockers, the modifications of the body. This is a desecration of the temple in which God gave us, And so we have to realize that our bodies and becoming fat and obese like America is an abomination to what God has given us. And it's part and parcel of the evil, tyrannical, globalist agenda to make you fat and lethargic so you'll hurry up and die. Look at the coup. Who are the people that were most likely to die from that? Wasn't children, wasn't fit people, certainly wasn't the carnivores. It was people who are fat. If you're fat, you are falling victim to the agenda. The food in this country is toxic. And that's on purpose. And that's a point in which they're attacking the temple of God. This is a spiritual war. And so limit of economic mobility and viability. How many of us that are millennials are going to be able to afford a home? Very, very few of us, because they're trying to destroy economic mobility because they're creating a neo-feudal system. That's just a fact. If your indentured servitude is tied to your student loan debt, which it is for me, I'm a serf. I'm in a feudal system. I can't own anything, which was the point. That's the point of getting all these 17 and 18-year-old kids to take out loans that are end up going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars with ridiculous interest rates so that you are in servitude in perpetuity. You're not going to be able to get out of that. That is a spiritual attack, because obviously we know that what the church would teach about usury, and I don't need to go into any details. You guys can connect the dots there, but that's part of this global tyranny, and that's part of the spiritual battle that we're up against right now. And so the attack on aesthetics, this is another way in which they're attacking us. How many beautiful buildings are we building? Have you seen the latest monuments that have been built in the United States? You know, while they're taking down honorable men like Robert E. Lee, they're putting up monuments of St. George Floyd. Did you see the Martin Luther King monument that looked like a ginormous turd? Like, this is an attack on aesthetics, because that is an attack on beauty, and that's an attack on your ability to even connect with something transcendent than yourself. This is evil. This is part of a spiritual battle. And so the last part of the spiritual battle is the mocking of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, of which you tell me, show me a historical figure that is more mocked and you know, humiliated than Jesus Christ in the contemporary world. You can go on Netflix. I mean, they're getting ready to do a movie about the passion, about Jesus Christ and the apostles, and it's going to be all played by women. There's another one on Netflix where it's all about that Jesus Christ was a homosexual and he was actually having relationships with the apostles. This is disgusting. They don't do that about Muhammad. They don't even do that about the Buddha. They don't do that about Lao Tzu. They don't do that about various, you know, important religious figures around the world, but they do it about Jesus Christ. Interesting. Why is it that Jesus Christ is the one that is so focused on being mocked and humiliated publicly? Because this is a spiritual war. And so when we get into the point, is Russel Brand becoming a Christian? Well, clearly he's moving towards Christ. As I said in the interview we're getting ready to see, he makes an emphatic statement towards the end that you are not God. And I have videos we're going to watch in just a second here, in which you go back to his spiritual New Age worldview of just 3 years ago. And he's saying stuff essentially that you are God, that divinity is consciousness. The expansion of consciousness is the main point, and that we live in our own realities, and that we are, again, essentially our own gods. But this is shifted, and he's now again claiming to wear a cross. Well, he does wear a cross, but one of the things that have opened his eyes is that becoming a husband and a father changed his priorities. And he talked about his sort of hedonistic life that he lived, which most of us were familiar with through the early 2000s, having multiple sexual partners. You know, obviously he was a drug addict who then got clean, and so sex was sort of his outlet while living a sober life. And now he regrets that. He says he doesn't support that, and he sees how shallow that lifestyle is, because now that he's been married, he got into a committed relationship, and now that they've had children, he sees that his priorities have totally shifted, and that suffering and sacrificing for others is actually the point that elevates him spiritually. And so I said, and we're going to hear about it, his son actually had to have heart surgery. And one of the things that moved him was to see the medical people in the hospital who were aiding and helping his child, doing it because they want to help people. And he thought, wow, this idea of self-service for others and putting people in a position in which you want to serve them is actually very, very rewarding. And again, when we look at who in history and spiritual traditions actually promotes this explicitly as the way in which we proceed spiritually, it's Jesus Christ. It's Christianity, because he, the incarnate God, came to serve, not to be served. Although obviously we worship him, but he talks about that. That's again in Matthew, he makes that point, you know, learn what this means. You know, I came to serve, not to be served, in regards to, again, helping those of lowliness. And so is he a Christian? I'd say not yet, actually. You know, I've seen many people try to make this conversation. Oh, look, Russel Brand's Christian. Not yet, right? Because this is why I don't consider Jordan Peterson a Christian. Because I think to be a Christian, you really can't until you say that the incarnate God literally incarnated. And we talked about this a little bit at church today, that if God didn't incarnate all the semiotics, all the archetypes, all this different stuff, it doesn't really matter. It's kind of your own interpretations. It's all in your head. But once you get to the point where you can say, no, I actually believe fully, I have faith in my heart, there's something that has changed me, I know that God came in the flesh. Well, now you've made it tangible. You've made it imminent. You've collapsed the transcendent and the immanence into, again, the single person of Jesus Christ. And so Is he Christian? I'd say not yet. He's certainly moving in that direction. And I think it's much more sincere than people are saying, oh, look, Elon Musk is going to become Christian. No, he was on like the Lex Friedman podcast or something, made a point that, yeah, I could use some more Jesus. No, stop. Elon Musk is not becoming Christian, and Elon Musk definitely does not have our best interests at heart. He is a globalist. He is a transhumanist. But Russel Brand, I think there's some real hope, and we're going to see that today in the conversation. And he says that he's been reading scripture. And I think this is huge for people, especially when you come back to scripture with adult eyes. I remember as a child, reading the Bible was always very difficult. You kind of don't know what you're reading. But once you're an adult, once you have life experience, once you've kind of gone on your prodigal journey and you come back with symbols and archetypes and understanding, and then you're also reading it from a sincere spiritual disposition, the depth is astounding. And I'll make a point because he brings this up, that he's been reading scripture and this has really been affecting him. But anybody who gone to liturgy today, if you're an Orthodox Christian, you know that if you're on the Western calendar, which I am on, then the Bible reading was from Luke about Zacchaeus, the tax collector, right? But this is the profundity of scripture once you really start to get into it, right? So Zacchaeus, if you're familiar with the story, he's a tax collector who climbs the sycamore tree. He's up in the tree. Jesus is passing. Jesus sees Zacchaeus. He looks at him. He stops. He calls him out. He says, Zacchaeus, come down. He tells him, I have to stay at your house tonight. And then they essentially go to the house, and Zacchaeus tells Christ that he's going to change his ways, and that anybody that he has defrauded, that they will get back what they deserve fourfold. Well, okay, Patrick, great. Well, once you have eyes to see and ears to hear, the depth goes deeper and deeper and deeper. You see, Zacchaeus was a tax collector. As our priest today made the comment, he's kind of like Mr. Potter in It's a Wonderful Life. You know, he's like the banker figure. He's the wealthy figure working for the Romans. The Jews don't want anything to do with the tax collectors because they say, look, you're extorting your own people for the Romans. And so this man of immense wealth climbs a tree to see Christ. What's that signify? Humility. Can you imagine the banker of our day? Can you imagine Jamie Dimon being caught climbing a tree to see who the man that's performing miracles? No, of course not. It's a form of humility. What's being laid out in scripture is that Zacchaeus humbles himself. And then what happens? Christ comes by and he pierces him. He looks at him. He catches him and he calls him out by name and says, Zacchaeus, come down from here. And he tells him, I need to stay at your house tonight. And Zacchaeus, then confronted with the living God, confronted with the Messiah, then confesses his sins and tells him, look, I'll do better. Whatever I took from people, I'll give them back fourfold. And what's interesting is we can see a connection back with Amos. If you're familiar with the prophet Amos, and where he would do with the sycamore fig trees, he would go by and pierce. And I got to give a special shout out to one of our parishioners, Austin, because this is what we were talking about in fellowship today. He's like, don't you remember Amos in scripture? He goes by the figs and he pierces the fig so the fig will ripen quicker. Christ walks by Zacchaeus in the top of the sycamore tree, pierces him with his gaze, calls him out and brings him forth. Why? So Zacchaeus will ripen, become who he's supposed to be, right? And so this connection between figs, between Amos, between Zacchaeus, you see, once you start getting into scripture, it's so damn deep. It's endless. It's endless. And I think the fact that Russel Brand is now talking about being a regular reader of scripture and the Bible, this points in a good direction. So I just wanted to highlight that as we move forward, is that, you know, once you acquire a sort of Christian frontima, and once you start getting deeper and deeper into scripture, things begin to make more and more sense. And I want to point out then, in regards to this conversion of Russel Brand, a few things real quick. So let me pull this up. This is, again, just a few highlights of where he was and where he is now, so we can see his sort of conversion. Because again, I did a critique of his and I got all these people that were supportive. Oh my gosh, you're using all this philosophy stuff. He doesn't think like that. Okay, sure. But this is him just 3 years ago being asked what he thinks about God. Okay. And so here's his response. What sort of God do you believe in, is the question asked.
So I guess the first part of the question is, well, can you speak more about your definition of what God is and whether it's sort of a practical definition that you use in your life? And then conversely, do you believe in the opposite of that, in the idea of evil as a sort of concept that is useful in life?
Now, again, listen to this. And when we get into the conversation with Tucker Carlson, you'll see a total different perception. But listen to his focus on what God he thinks he's worshiping and what he thinks of evil.
Well, no, I don't really believe in evil, actually, because I feel like most of the time what we would regard as evil can be recontextualized when you look at the circumstances under which it happened, i.e., I don't feel like it's evil when someone gets a terrible disease. I just think that's sort of reality on another level. I don't think it's evil when someone is violent. It's just kind of, look at the conditions and circumstances, although the results might be painful. In terms of God, what I feel like, and I really urge all of you to listen to the first 20 minutes of this bloody thing I listened to yesterday. It was Terence McKenna, of whom I consider myself to be a fan.
Terence McKenna, right? Terence McKenna. I've done a lot of critiques of Terence McKenna and his sort of psychonautic spiritual worldview. But again, this is where Russell was over 3 years ago.
And right, Terence McKenna. Go on YouTube and look at the Terence McKenna video, Modern Society. The first 20 minutes of it, he's smashed my head up, because what he talks about really is that. Oh, well, what was that quote I sent you yesterday, Demaya, from Terence McKenna? I sent it on the chat. He said, you can't understand the universal mystery using a primate's neural network. The universal mystery meaning the limitless complexity of the physical, biological, and chemical world. How can we possibly understand and appreciate that with...
Okay, we don't need to go too far into it. The point is he doesn't believe an evil exists. It's basically a misconstruing based on subjective perceptions, and he goes on to basically insinuate of a God of like universal consciousness. Here's another clip again of him talking about you are a God.
All reality is held within your consciousness. There is nothing that you are aware of that you do not know about, whether it's the Big Bang or the dinosaurs or political assassinations or quantum physics. All of that exists within your individual awareness. That is anticipated in all of the great ideologies. In Islam, in Christianity, in Buddhism, they tell you this. It's an illusion, but you have to participate as if it is real. You have to find the beauty in it. You are creating reality while you're living it. You are God.
Okay. So now this is where he posted something a few days ago, and this has been the point in which people say, oh, is Russel Brand coming back to Christianity? And so notice the difference in his perception of where he is spiritually.
The reason I wear a cross is because Christianity, and in particular the figure of Christ, are, it seems to me, inevitably becoming more important as I become more familiar with suffering, purpose, self, and not self. Reading the Bible a lot more, and as I've told you before, I'm reading Rick Warren's Purpose-Driven Life. When I grew up, Christianity seemed like it was either really irrelevant and old-fashioned and sort of dusty and sort of incense and sort of, or they tried to modernize it, and it seems just like, right, okay, we're going to talk about Jesus. And like both of those routes seem like, I don't know if there's anything for me. And I suppose it takes a certain amount of adulthood, and it might be different for all of us. For me, it seems that it's taken quite a lot to recognize that I need a personal relationship with God. It occurred to me that if instead of always talking to myself inwardly, I could replace one of those voices with an indwelling God. It says in Galatians, it is our job to die so that as Christ died on the cross, he might be reborn in us. I'm very interested to hear what you think, because for me, my heart is open. Let me know what you think in the comments and chat, remember.
So we see he's moving in the right direction, but I got to point out, the guy's got a button-up shirt with a bunch of zodiacs all over it. Like on the pocket, it says Gemini, and if you guys were able to see on the sleeves, it's a bunch of astrological zodiacs. So is he Christian? I don't think he's fully there yet, but here's another video of him kind of talking about it.
Be interested to know what you think, with a constant, incessant, ongoing voice in your head, always telling you stuff. Oh no, don't do that. Why'd that person say that? Oh, I like that. I don't like this. I like them. Well, essentially, the ongoing scripture of selfishness, narcissism, the theology of preference. I prefer this. I am adverse to that. That becomes the religion. It occurred to me that if instead of always talking to myself inwardly, which I do inadvertently without effort, I could replace one of those voices with an indwelling God, Jesus Christ, for example. And so when I'm saying, oh, I want this, I'm not good enough, I need that, I'm scared of this, I want that, why won't these people do that? That the voice that's in there with me, I could choose to be Jesus Christ, because it's pretty clear what Jesus Christ is about. Kindness, putting other people first, willingness to sacrifice, always scrutinizing authority, staying clear about what justice is and what justice isn't, and being aware of those principles. You might be familiar.
Okay, so this is quite a different trend based on the stream. I found my notes from like 2 years ago when I did the stream on his spirituality. And the points that I have is that he privileges this idea that you just have to love everybody so that we all can be unified and that the world can be a better place. Again, this very lovey-dovey new age sentimentality, very little about suffering, very little about sacrifice, very much in regards to the evolutionary process of consciousness. Again, God is consciousness. He made moral claims in my video that I did critiqued him 2 years ago. He made all these moral claims, which are essentially Christian morality, yet his spiritual metaphysical worldview is nothing akin to a Christian paradigm. And so he also was a perennialist. And so he may still be a perennialist in some ways, but when we watch the conversation today, remember, he's been attacked because of, again, criticizing the coup, criticizing banking, criticizing various things, especially by his own government. And the suffering has certainly put him into a different place. He's become a married man. He has children. And so as we watched our stream today, or our video today, I think it's interesting. Is he Christian? No, I'm against, I disagree with many of these people that are saying, oh, look, Russel Brand's Christian now. I don't know about that. I wouldn't say that he is, but he's certainly moving in the right direction. So, yeah, I mean, I hope he has had narcissistic tendencies, but a lot of people have. I mean, look at America, look at the West. Most people have a form of narcissism and self-worship. So it takes a lot to eventually, and again, is Rick Warren's A Purpose-Driven Life sort of the key text to get into a Christian paradigm? Not exactly. I know it's been beneficial for many people, especially coming from that sort of secular spiritual world. But I think there's hope for him, and I hope that he gets better, and I hope that he moves in the right direction. But I am actually going to disagree with many of the people and say I don't think he's a Christian yet. Hopefully he moves in that direction. Hopefully he continues on this journey. But he's made a lot of claims, in my opinion, even recently, that I don't know so much about that. So I'll let you guys come to your own opinions after we get into it. So guys, smash that like real quick. Smash that like. I just want to take care of a few quick things. I want to remind everybody we have a premium members meeting this Wednesday, and we have a fitness meeting tomorrow, this Friday. So if you guys want to join the fitness meeting, of which we get into a private Zoom meeting with people that are interested in bettering their lives in every possible way, we grade ourselves through physical fitness, diet, our prayer and spiritual life, and career and purpose. So if you want an accountability group, we're meeting tomorrow night, 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you sign up using this link right here, I promise you will get the invite. Also, we have a premium member meeting. It's a think tank. We talk about a lot of different topics. I know Thomas is in here in the chat. Thomas is in our group. And so if you want to join the private Zoom meeting of people, men all around the world, talking about a variety of topics that you've heard me speak on live, join the think tank. You can do so with that link right there. Also, if anybody wants to sign up for a one-on-one, you can do so with this link right here. Would appreciate that. We can get into a private Zoom meeting and talk about any topic your heart desires. And also, if anybody wants to sponsor a stream, we got a sponsored stream coming Tuesday on the theology of the uncreated light, talking about the transfiguration of Christ, talking about the Taboric light. So shout out to that person who wants to maintain their anonymity. So it's an anonymous sponsor, but we will be diving into that Tuesday evening, because we have the fitness meeting tomorrow night. So if you want to sponsor a stream, you got a topic, as long as it's not another book review. I got to finish these two. Shout out to AC because he's been a great sponsor. Once I finish these two books and do sponsored streams on those, I have to get my research done. So no more book reviews, at least for a minute. Give me at least 6 months to get all my other stuff done. And then also don't forget, if you want to support my work, grab some merch over at the store. We have it up at the website, also on YouTube. Get yourself a sweatshirt, a coffee mug, all types of stuff, t-shirts, jackets. We got all types of stuff over there. And then if anybody is in the market for some Orthodox merchandise, go no further than orthodoxdepot.com. Orthodoxdepot.com. Use promo code COTEL, and you'll get 10% off all products. They got icons, incense, prayer ropes, whatever you may need. Use promo code COTEL. You'll get 10% off, and you'll be able to help me out as well. All right. So with that being said, now let's just get into our conversation, or at least our video here. And one of the things I was going to show you guys, it's not really that important, but it's interesting nonetheless. Did you guys know Rob Schneider has converted to Catholicism? Now, obviously, he's not Orthodox, and I'm not going to play this whole thing, but Rob Schneider has converted, and this is a little snippet of him talking about that Jesus Christ is the cornerstone, the rock that he basically wants to build his life on, and it took him a while to find that. So again, another person we see that's kind of lived a different lifestyle, slowly but surely coming back to the truth. So without further ado, guys, now let's get into our video today, which again is going to be very elucidating, not just on Russel Brand spirituality, but what's happening around the world. So here we go. Smash that like. Also, if you guys want to support with any super chats or comments, please use the Dono chat link, or YouTube, or Streamlabs. That would be greatly appreciated. I don't think we have any thus far, but guys, if you want to support my work, send in some super chats, some questions, any of that stuff. I'd greatly appreciate it. Oh, shout out to Orthodox Farm Chat. It says, my dad went to high school with Rob Schneider. Shout out Pacifica, California. That's sick, dude. I did not know that. I've actually met Rob Schneider, and he is a very funny and nice guy. I remember I went to a comedy special and was able to go meet him backstage afterwards. He was a very down-to-earth, nice guy. So I'm personally a Rob Schneider fan even before his recent conversion. So the fact that he and his wife have converted to Catholicism, good. I'm not a papist, as you guys know, but I think it's a good thing. Now Trent Horn has a doppelganger. Oh, male gigolo converts. That's right, Moldy Apple. That means there's hope for you, my man. There's hope for you. So anyways, guys, appreciate it. If you want to support, feel free to send something on Dono Chat, Streamlabs, or on YouTube. Okay, without further ado, let's get into this video.
Back in September, media outlets around the world, almost all of them here in the West and the English-speaking world, ran headlines that shocked a lot of readers and viewers. Russel Brand, the movie star, the comedian, now the podcaster, was a sex criminal, a bad man, a sex criminal. Now, none of the outlets ran the names of the accusers who had been sexually abused by Russel Brand. That was conspicuously absent. But the judgment was overwhelming. This is a very bad man, and he needs to be taken out of public view for the sake of the rest of us. What was interesting about this is that, in fact, it was the final scene in a long movie that had been playing out for the preceding couple of years outside of public view. This was an attempt to make Russel Brand shut up. Russel Brand has views that diverge from those of most Western governments on big issues, not small things, big issues, questions of economic policy and war and peace. And they decided we have to make this man be quiet. Why Russel Brand? Well, because in contrast to a lot of us who give our opinions for a living, Russel Brand had the capacity to win people over from the other side. He hadn't spent a life identified with the far right, just the opposite. Russel Brand was a man of the left, and to most people, a cultural. Everyone knows who Russel Brand is, and so he had the power.
Shout out to all the strawberry community out there. The Baron Strawberry throws in $2. Catholicism is a step in the right direction. It absolutely is. Shout out to Baron Strawberry. Guys, I will be live with the Baron. I know Crispy's going to be excited for this. I will be live with the Baron at noon Eastern Standard Time Tuesday. Noon Eastern Standard Time Tuesday. This is the Baron Strawberry. I'll be in the strawberry patch with the Baron Tuesday at noon. Thank you so much, brother, for the $2 super chat, and God bless you and your family, man. Really looking forward to diving into things on Tuesday. Wish you the best. Appreciate it. All right.
Power, the capacity to persuade, and that was the threat. So we thought it'd be interesting to go through in some detail what happened to Russel Brand. None of this has ever been aired before. The censorship campaign against him began with governments, not private organizations, but governments, their intel services and their policymakers. And as we said, it played out outside public view. And we thought it would be very interesting and important for people to know what exactly happened. And so to find out, we are now joined by Russel Brand himself, and we're grateful to be. Russel Brand, thank you so much.
Tucker, thanks for having me here.
So I didn't know any, I just want to say I didn't know any of this. And I experienced you because I didn't know you as a viewer. And I remember thinking, boy, that is one of the most articulate critiques of the brand new war in Ukraine I had ever seen. I saw one.
Shout out to Blue Skittle, throws in $5. No comment. Thank you so much, Blue Skittle. God bless you, brother, for all the support. Truly appreciate that, my man.
One of your videos on the war in Ukraine. And this was in the winter of 2022, 2 years ago. And you were making kind of a remarkable case, not against the Ukrainian people and certainly not in favor of Russia, but that there might be real implications for the West if we get involved in a war that is not our own. And you
By the way, as soon as Tucker's interview with Vladimir Putin comes out, we will be doing a review of that immediately on the channel here. So make sure you guys stay tuned. I'm really excited to see what Vlad Putin has to say. I see a lot of people. Did you guys see Bill Kristol and, of course, the globalist establishment all upset about there being a conversation? Even the sophisticated Mr. James Lindsay is worried about KGB propaganda because Tucker's going to interview Vlad. Oh, James.
I thought said it so well. What I missed, and I'm now seeing, is that in March of 2022.
Oh, thank you to the Baron again. Throws in another $5. Thank you so much, Baron. He says, looking forward to it. Me as well, my man. Me as well. So really looking for you. Turtle Lip strikes again. Guys, James Lindsay is a running joke at this point. I don't know if you guys follow James Lindsay on X. He is a running joke. He's upset because the National Guard from various states are going to the southern border to stop people at Eagle Pass, and it's going to be a false flag. Well, it could be. It could be. But his solution is just let them all come in. It's like, dude, shut up. And then he's all upset today. That was the big thing today and yesterday. He's all upset because people want to hear what Vladimir Putin has to say, and they don't understand he's full of KGB propaganda. Oh, shut up, Turtle Lips. What a joke. But anyways, thank you so much to the Baron for the super chat. Really appreciate you, my man. God bless you. And looking forward to the conversation on Tuesday. Should be a lot of fun. So shout out to the Baron. All right.
You were denounced by an organization connected directly to the U.S. government as an agent of Chinese propaganda for your views on Ukraine. So let me just ask you your experience of this. Did you know that you were being attacked as a Chinese propagandist for your views on Ukraine?
I actually didn't, and still at this point struggle to see entirely what the connections are between those two issues and how I would develop and cultivate a strong affinity with China. I've never been to China. I don't purport to understand China. Certainly don't advocate for Chinese policy. I've just got a relatively superficial dilettante knowledge of geopolitical matters in the South Asian seas. It's not something that I would like tie my colours to the mast for or be willing to be publicly ashamed, attacked, and even jailed for.
So it happened, though.
Yeah.
And a lot happens on the internet that we miss. But these, in my reading of it, is, and we haven't, by the way, talked about this off air, but my reading of it is that these were the early seeds of a very deceptive plan that flowered more than a year later in September when you were accused of these crimes, and demonetized and censored as a result of that. But looking back, so you were accused by a group called COTEL. It published a story on its anti-disinformation newsletter. Now,
Oh, we got Wicked Wally in the house. Everybody wish him a good morning. He probably just woke up. Good morning. Tip of the morning to you, Wicked Wally. He says, I'm going to say it, and I'm not sorry. I guess Russell is really working on rebranding. He is. He is. Thank you, Wicked Wally. Again, always comes in clutch with the dad jokes. God bless you, Wicked Wally. Hope you're doing well. And good morning. I hope you're probably getting a well-rounded breakfast right now. So God bless, brother. Thank you for the support. But he's on a tour to rebrand, certainly. Oh gosh.
COTEL is connected to the UK government, but it's also connected to the CIA. How does it make you feel to know that you were in the crosshairs of two of the most powerful governments in the world and their intel agencies?
It seems to me ridiculously grandiose to even imagine that I would stir and arouse the interests of such powerful agencies and groups, that the British government, if indirectly, would spend considerable sums on observing and de-amplifying content, that true information shared through our platforms in the period of the pandemic was censored, was cited as high risk, that companies like Moderna had spent considerable revenue tracking our content and again de-amplifying it, that Dame Caroline Dinenage, whose husband is a psyops expert that worked abroad in terrorism before deploying those methods and techniques and to some degree those teams to observe what they call disinformation and misinformation in the UK. I recognize that the new emergent media spaces present a lot of possibilities, even with your kind compliments about our reporting on the Ukraine. All we've essentially done is listen to brilliant academics talking about the history of NATO and the coup in 2014 in Ukraine and Putin's explicit declaration that he would prefer, let's put it mildly, that Ukraine were not invited into NATO, that some of the regional disputes, how they're escalating tensions. This is information that, because of independent media, is available. And perhaps the function that we, our media organization, have fulfilled is been to collate that information and convey it directly in an accessible manner to give people an alternative perspective to the homogenized mainstream opinion,
yes,
which amounts to, I've learned over the last few years, the amplification and normalization of the agenda of the powerful, that no opinions can be allowed into that space. And I'm astonished by how jealously it is guarded. There are points in my life where my personal self-regard would have loved the idea that I would be considered important enough to attack on this scale, to spend this amount of revenue and resources on. But I'm now seeing that independent media itself is an extraordinary threat. That independent media inevitably leads to independent politics and independent thought. And we appear to be at some precipitous moment of radical transition. I'm not sure, and I'm not sure if anybody could be sure of where this is all heading, what the exact teleology is, but it seems to be to do with mass centralization, globalization, significant attempts to control the information space that are so rigorously adhered to and protected that even what you might imagine to be a marginal voice is considered a significant enough threat to warrant coordinated media attacks, expenditure on peculiar, clandestine, non-government organizations and think tanks that take their money from the military-industrial complex, from the legacy media, who, by the way, when they're critiquing independent media, they got skin in the game. They're not able to independently assess your work or my work or the medical opinions of Joe Rogan. They have a vested interest in destroying those organizations. In the last few years, I've learned about the Trusted News Initiative, which
has extraordinary connections again to big pharma and sets of interest around the reporting on war that have decided and determined that they are no longer competing with one another. You in particular come from a journalistic background where it would have been commonplace for the great institutions of American media to compete with one another for scoops. The New York Times versus the world. Those days are gone. It explicitly states on the Trusted News Initiative website, we are no longer in competition with one another. We have to curtail and stamp out, I think it even uses the word choke, independent media. And it's clear that there are now sets of globalist organizations funded by government, but also corporations that are making deliberate, profound attempts to shut down any dissent in an astonishingly aggressive way. And to be sort of caught up in it is terrifying on one level, absolutely terrifying, particularly due to the nature of allegations that I faced, but also revealing. More importantly, it's revealing about the way that I believe the world, and in particular this space, will be affected, and the way these events will continue to unfold in the coming years.
So I have a comment on that. I certainly believe that one of the biggest threats to the system is these alternative narratives. As you guys know, I'm skeptical about everybody. People saying, Tucker, where's the Kabbalah bracelet? I'm aware. I'm very aware. I'm very skeptical of every person that's prominent in the truther space, to be quite frank. But I do believe that Rumble, I'm still skeptical of Rumble. I've looked at deep dives into the guy who owns Rumble. He seems to be left of center. So I don't, again, is it another sort of siloing of people that eventually they can deplatform them? I don't know. Right now, Rumble seems to be doing the right thing. Natasha says, you aren't a large platform with influence without being controlled. I actually believe that to some degree. I do believe that to some degree because the people that have massive platforms are part and parcel to the game in one way or another. Now, X, as I've said, no doubt it has shifted the Overton window, and now we see it literally clamping down on that. I saw people just posting Bible verses about the synagogue of Satan, and that being flagged on X now as hate speech. So this idea that Elon Musk he's for free speech, he's going to give us back. Give me a freaking break. Like, that's one of the people that I can't stand how people hold up as like he's a truther. He's telling us he said that illegal immigration is bad. No shit. Obviously, but anybody who thinks Elon Musk or Tucker, he's got plenty of opinions I disagree with. I'm skeptical of Carlson. I'm obviously skeptical of Brand, but I think they are contributing to a shift in the narrative, and it's moving one way or another. Yeah, I agree with Natasha. Elon has always been full of BS. No doubt about that. No doubt about that. Yeah, everybody seems to be in agreement with Elon Musk here. I remember I did a stream on Elon Musk recently, and people were so upset. But free speech on X. Shut up. Just shut up. There is no free speech on X, you nitwit. Yeah, people are as naive as hell about everybody. And the same thing's true with Tucker, that people think, oh, Tucker's going to save us. Tucker. There's a lot of things I agree with him on. Clearly, our appreciation for Zens is one thing that we agree on. But I think it's important just to see what the narratives are going on. And for Russel Brand, I think the fact that he was labeled as a rapist by these anonymous women that he couldn't find out who exactly they were to sort of get him kicked off YouTube and stuff. Is he part and parcel of certain things? Maybe I'm sure he was in his previous days, but I think what he was saying about the COOF, what he was saying about globalism, the WEF, big pharma, I think they did do a hit piece on him, and it makes you real skeptical. Like I said earlier about Vince McMahon with WWE. Why would a billionaire be a sex trafficker of like a handful of women with a girl that he apparently had an extended relationship with, that he bought like a new BMW for, all these handbags, took her on vacations? I don't think that's sex trafficking. So we see that the system is, and I'm not trying to make a claim about the Tate brothers, but it's certainly possible that the system, one of the ways in which they want to take people down is label them as like sexual violent sexual deviance in one way or another, whether it be rape or sex trafficking, seems to keep emerging because Vince McMahon, if you guys don't know, is like a very conservative sort of alpha male type guy. And I speculate, because of his personal political opinions and the fact that WWE just made like this massive deal where it totally revolutionized the sort of wrestling world. I think that's why the powers that be have come after him. So again, no matter what you think about Russel Brand, which again, I'm skeptical of too, I think the system did try to come after him because of some of the stuff he was talking about on YouTube. And particularly because the vast majority of his audience is left of center. It's not like the orthosphere where all of us are pretty well based and red pilled, if you know what I mean.
What I love about your critique is that you're coming to all of this pretty cold, since you had a midlife career change. You're doing something very different from what you did 15 years ago. And I'm wondering if your assumptions haven't been completely blown up. You're a British citizen.
What a dumb comment. Citing someone as a billionaire as a reason for them not being involved in trafficking is hilarious. Nobody said it's because he's a billionaire. Listen to the words I said, retard. I was talking about the fact that it was his girlfriend, that they're in an extended relationship. Like, again, just leave, dude. And Epstein wasn't a billionaire, and he worked with Mossad and all these. So, but Vince McMahon is not a honeypot operation. So maybe he is guilty. I'm not claiming he's totally innocent. I just think it's very convenient that all of a sudden these charges are being claimed after WWE makes this massive deal, making it a global business. Thanks, I'm retarded. Got it. Well, at least you understood that. Appreciate it. All right.
Lived in the country all of your life. How strange is it to know that your tax dollars are being used against you by your government, which they are? And how bewildering is it to find that the open contest of ideas that we were promised here in the West, may the best idea win, is a sham?
Yes, well, I suppose I went into the entertainment industry really with the giddy trajectory that propels a lot of people into those spaces, believing that there might be some fulfillment, and certainly there would be excitement. And when I was a denizen of that world, I was fostered and adored and celebrated and facilitated and lived the kind of lifestyle which I think is kind of common for people in that area, for single people, in my case, drug and alcohol free, but certainly with an appetite for a promiscuous lifestyle. When I was part of it, I found it empty and unfulfilling, of course, as it would be, as anyone who's had those kind of experiences ultimately realizes. When I departed it, as a result really of various spiritual crises or commercial failures or a combination of those events, I really felt like a coming home to the type of values that I grew up with. I grew up in a normal blue collar town, Grays, kind of like a place that's like New Jersey, I guess, a kind of suburban, outside of the city, normal people, good values kind of place. And what I feel like happened is like, well, since I've had a family, since, you know, I've got a young son, I've got a couple of daughters, is I feel like that I was able to deploy the skills learned through working in entertainment as a man in recovery in a new space. And what simply began with myself and my partners is tell the truth about things you care about. Kind of over time, it began to, I spoke to Glenn Greenwald the other day, and he goes, you know, you shouldn't be surprised that if you attack the most powerful interests in the world, the deep state, powerful corporations, the machinery of war, that you yourself are the recipient of attacks. Why is that surprising to you? I know, but because sometimes it does feel speculative, doesn't it? You're talking about these really powerful organizations and the way that it's funded and the way that it crosses over and their malfeasant, underhanded, insidious activity. And then as it starts to become more popular, as more and more people realize that it's actually true, as more and more people become willing to take back control in their own lives, as more and more people refuse to consent to being treated in this sort of infantile way, having their autonomy and personal and mental and spiritual freedom undermined, their connection to their land undermined, their connection to nature.
I got to read this comment. Shout out to my friend. He says, someone needs to tell Russell he doesn't need to fake the accent anymore. Oh man, I see some of you guys were talking about Vix McMahon. He may be a sexual freak or a sexual deviant. I just don't think he was sex trafficking. And as Wicked Wally highlighted, I think once the check stopped hitting that chick's bank account, who was totally fine with it for years through a relationship, all of a sudden, he's now a sex trafficker. So anyway, don't mean to derail the conversation with Vince McMahon, but anyways, moving forward.
Devoided, you start to realize that you're actually operating in quite a powerful territory. But while power is very serious and it has to work very hard to maintain its grip, so these organizations, does it surprise me to find that the British government, through the Department of Culture and Media and Sport, the very people that sponsored the new, rather draconian online safety bill, personally contacted the height of these allegations and attacks on me, contacted social media platforms and asked if I would be demonetized. But they're the body that regulates them. They have the ability to find those organizations. They're the very person who is sponsoring the online security bill.
Pause for a second, just to
of
make sure
course.
I understand what you're saying. So these accusations appeared. There were, I don't know if this has changed, but at the time there were no names attached at all. You were accused anonymously of committing crimes. And then your own government, which you pay for,
yes,
reached out without telling you to online service providers and media organizations and said, please kick him off and censor him and take his money away. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's
before
right.
Any kind of trial, before
Yes.
any proof that you were guilty, before any names were attached.
Yeah.
That happened.
Yeah, and it's the same people that are sponsoring online safety bills, which amount to facilitating further censorship.
But what a betrayal by your own government.
Well, it's astonishing if you regard your government to be in a position of service rather than a position of domination and control. But what's become apparent in recent years is what the nature of our relationship with government is, that they are there to rule and control and dominate. And whilst they may now do it with an aesthetic of care and with the language of inclusivity, I believe the threat of authoritarianism is far, far greater from those that use the language of liberalism than these emergent, somewhat nationalistically oriented populist movements present.
Caravaggio makes a great point here. He talks about Xi Jinping allows corruption throughout Chinese politics because it allows him to cancel anyone at any time. I feel our elites are not much different. Now, I absolutely believe that's how the Western power structure works, is they allow these people to be degenerates. And that's, I mean, it gets back to the Epstein and the honeypot operations. They want these people to engage in all these deviant behaviors, the Biden family, the crime family, which is true for all U.S. politicians. And it doesn't matter if they're Republican or Democrat. That's one of the things that are so annoying with the boomers. They're like, oh, the Democrats. Dude, shut up. What are you talking about? The GOP is just as bad. There's literally less than a handful of people in public life that are actually worthy of being sort of honorable people. There's very, very few. So I agree with Caravaggio. I think this is actually how the Western world works as well.
Because they are leveraging that power now. They're interested in censorship. They're militarizing the police force. They're introducing protest laws. They're introducing censorship laws. Through their actions, we can observe them. Through their fruits, can we know them? We can see what they. And if you try to dissent, if you try to oppose, even what I consider to be a relatively marginal scale, then the consequences are severe and immediate and robust and terrifying.
I think what makes your specific case so compelling is that if they could do it to you, a person who had the admiration of a lot of people who weren't interested in politics and was pretty famous and had some means, etc., then the average person stands no chance against these forces. So with that, if you don't mind, can we get specific about a couple of things that you mentioned? The first is Moderna, which is a drug company. It's part of Big Pharma. Tell us how you intersected with Pharma and with Moderna and what you think they did to you.
During the pandemic period, we reported continually about some of the clinical trials that Moderna conducted and whether or not they ought be deemed sufficiently rigorous to warrant the level of measures that were being implemented, if not entirely mandated. We talked about a government official called Jonathan Van Tam, who was the public face of the government, saying, you know, we should be taking vaccines, recommending that the measures escalate. Jonathan Van Tam subsequently took a position at Moderna. We reported on that. People within the FDA took positions at Moderna. We reported on that. We accurately reported that both Pfizer and Moderna were making $1,000 like a second or a minute, just like it. We reported a lot. We reported accurately and thoroughly about the degree to which big pharma were profiting from a situation in which Albert Bourla explicitly said it would be inhumane to profit from this global crisis. This meant that we were tracked by agencies employed by Moderna. They had like us on a high risk category. This is the reporting of Li Fang on his Substack. Not just me, Jay Bhattacharya, Michael Schellenberger, Alex Berenson, a number of what you might call anti-pandemic measures voices or strong critics of the way that the pandemic unfolded were under observation by agencies that were either funded by big pharma, sometimes the government. And in a sense, what I'm starting to realize, Tucker, is this cartilage between the state and the corporate world is often provided by these unusual organizations that are claiming to be observing disinformation or monitoring, but they're actually crushing dissent. That's what they're doing in practice. Dissenting voices are being aggressively crushed by almost any means necessary. That media organizations are collaborated in a way that is unprecedented in order to shut down dissenting voices. And it appears to me that this is part of something. I don't know that we've seen anything like this before.
So what you're saying is that these organizations which purport to be independent are not actually independent from government. They merely give government, the politicians and the intel agencies, especially some plausible deniability, some distance from what they're doing. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that, Tucker, that seems to be the function. There's a group called Logically, and Logically have received millions of pounds of taxpayer money. And what they do is observe dissenting voices around, in particular, COVID and pandemic measures. But they are now working in the United States, apparently in order to regard
Mela, I always think the same thing is, why does he always have these shirts that like hang down to the middle of his chest? I don't get it. It's a fashion. Again, maybe I'm out of the fashion loop. I'm not sure. Clontarf says, I'm guessing that's a no, Mela. I'm not sure why he always has these strange shirts, but he's making a good point in regards to many of these non-for-profit organizations that are there to stop hate speech, you know, things like the ADL and stuff. The real point is to basically be these attack dogs so that the government funds them. They then highlight the person, and then the private corporations that can attack that person by deplatforming them or taking away their means of income. And I think that's absolutely the truth. So he's making a good point, despite the wardrobe choice, which he always has. I don't get it.
Information around election campaigning. It seems that this group received government money in order to control online spaces.
So if you're worried about the security of electronic voting machines or absentee ballots, who are denounced by these people and censored by them.
That's precisely how it works. And of course, they employ former FBI agents, CIA agents. In a way, I suppose, what happened during the pandemic period, because of like the Twitter files, for example, we started to learn the degree to which the deep state were involved in social media companies, the degree to which they were censoring and shutting down information that we now know to be true, which it was, you know, of course, you'll be aware that Mark Zuckerberg said we did censor true information. The category, in fact, of malinformation is information that's true, but harmful to the agenda of the powerful. Well, it seems like groups like Logically and the Public Good Project are specifically empowered to control, censor, de-amplify information that is harmful to that agenda.
This seems...
Yeah, Media Matters is certainly one on this side of the Atlantic, no doubt.
Seems totalitarian.
Yeah.
To control what people are allowed to think. I think that's the definition of it.
What I've started to, I suppose that's what, in essence, what I've started to feel and report on consistently, as you noted at the beginning of this. I'm not someone who's affiliated organically with conservatism or what you might regard as right-wing politics, although I, of course, recognize the legitimacy of a whole variety of political views and the right of people to hold different views from one another. But it seems to me that authoritarianism now is being deliberately veiled in the insidious language of care, concern, safety, and convenience. It seems to me that we're in a time where we lurch from one crisis to another, that the crisis is always used to legitimize certain solutions, and a docile or terrified public is willing to participate in this proposed solutions that usually involve giving up their freedom. We are continually being invited to give up our freedom in exchange for safety or convenience, and it seems that this process is radically escalating, and I feel that this is something that we will see yet more of in the coming year. Like, you know, you've spoken publicly about this, that we're potentially on the precipice of serious, and to use your term, a hot war with Russia, and like that's being reported on in my country right now. It's like we're being prepped, groomed, primed for war is coming, that we're being kept in a state of constant anxiety in order to induce compliance, that the ongoing.
And in regards to the coming war, I mentioned this in a previous stream. Did you guys know that the Navy has done away with their GED and high school diploma requirement? Basically, I think you just have to pass, I think it's like a 50 or something above the entrance exam for the military, and now you can enter the U.S. Navy. And I think this is because, one, they're having a problem with recruits in the U.S. here specifically, but then it's another avenue to make all these illegals, 30-some million, legal, and then they'll be able to be into the military. And I believe personally that many of these illegals will be used to police the native population here, the domestic population in the U.S., which is true throughout history. If you guys have studied history, you know that it's very common for empires to use foreign soldiers, mercenaries, or whatnot to police the domestic population because they have no attachment, be it ethnic, religious, or whatnot, to those people. And I feel that part of this move to legalize these immigrants is to do exactly that. And so I definitely see the Western world prepping itself for a war with Russia, and really, yeah. So you get it. And with Iran, I don't know if you guys have seen too, with the Houthis and all this stuff, our freaking imbecile political leaders, they're so excited. The entire Zionist infrastructure to the U.S. government is so enthralled with the fact that we may be able to finally go to war with Iran. For who exactly? Oh, for Israel. Israel wants Iran to be gone. Why? Because they already control many aspects of the Arab world. You know, like the Saudi prince, they've already made an agreement with Israel. Egypt has already made an agreement with Israel. They just need Iran to get on board.
Stoking of cultural tension is to ensure that people don't begin to recognize that actually we have far more in common with one another than we do with these curious sets of establishment interests that seem to be transcendent of national democracy. To be explicit, I'm talking about organizations like the WHO, NATO, the WEF, and their astonishing influence. Added to that, the types of groups we've discussed already that have been exposed due to Li Fang's reporting, these think tanks and apparently independent organizations who are not independent when you look at where they get their money, big pharma or the government or the military industrial complex, or the kind of people they employ. People from deep state agencies such as the FBI and CIA that have extraordinary affinity with the legacy media and their ongoing agenda. So what I suppose I'm sensing is that totalitarianism now will not bear the inflections or aesthetics of the 20th century militarism, guys in medals with mustaches thumping their fists on a desk. Will be calmly told by gentlemen with beautifully coiffured hair or elegantly speaking ladies that just for our safety and just for our convenience, we will be returning to our homes. And anyone that has an audience or a base or an ability to communicate with people to disrupt those types of narratives will be identified and destroyed.
Well, they're certainly, they've identified you, and they're trying to destroy you in the most obvious way, in a way that hurts not just you, but your family. Was there ever a moment when this happened in September where you thought, you know, it's just kind of not worth it to be doing what I'm doing? This is so painful and so threatening to my family that maybe I just bow out and stop talking.
My son was born with a heart condition, and while this was happening, he was undergoing heart surgery. he was 12 weeks old. And I suppose what that did, Tucker, is it revealed that what we were experiencing was a public concoction. I am aware that I've put myself in an extremely vulnerable position by being very, very promiscuous. That is not the kind of conduct that I endorse, and it's certainly not how I would live now. That I've been shown a good many things as a result of these events. The value of my family, the value of friendship, the value of being able to speak publicly. And I mentioned my son because throughout it, I was able to maintain what is really important in life. And as you have actually said, we all know how this ends. Attacks like this, a crisis like this, hurtful though it is to be accused of what I consider to be the most appalling crimes, to be accused of this is very, very painful and very hurtful. But I am being shown that there are consequences for the rather foolish way that I lived in the past. Although, of course, again, to reiterate, due to the nature of the world we live in, of course, I deny any allegations of the kind that have been advanced. But what I've seen is the significance of family, the importance of having values that are transcendent of this, the importance of God. It's very easy to talk about God. I talk about God all the time. But when you need God, is when the outside world shows you the reality of your powerlessness. This can just happen. This can be undone. This can be unspooled at you. And with our boy, and to be in environments, as you understandably and obviously are, when you have a sick child, you're in environments with other people that are in the exact same position.
Yes.
And you are shown what is real, and you are shown what is truthful, and you are invited to look at life very differently. So there are many things that I am grateful for, as a matter of fact, even though it's not a situation that I welcome, and it's as I say, these are allegations that I object to in the strongest possible terms. The fact that it happened concurrently while I had the opportunity to see the strength and dignity of my wife and the beauty of my little son and the reality of the people that in this world that care for sick children, that perform heart surgery on tiny babies, shows me like, look at all of these realities. How can you live in the ridiculousness of their version of events? I couldn't have been more open and public about the way that I lived when I was younger. I was promiscuous. If anyone wanted to have sex with me, I'd have sex with them. I publicly announced it at the beginning of all shows. The idea that that was some sort of a smokescreen for criminal conduct is absurd. But I recognize now that unless you're willing to be a participant in these systems of compliance and distraction, then you pose some kind of evident threat.
A big threat.
Yeah.
Threat. I mean, obviously, the response proves the power of the threat that you posed and still do. But again, just to quickly back to my question, because this was so intense and it happened as your son was born and undergoing the surgery, did it ever cross your mind like I clearly have hit the third rail and I'm out? I've seen that happen a number of times.
Have you?
With people. Yes, I have. And yes, with well-known people. But you didn't do that. And here you are, you clearly thought about it and you've decided that you're going to continue forward. Was that a hard decision?
Do you sometimes think that there is no choice? You have no choice. Did you ever really have?
Yes, I do feel that way strongly.
There is no choice. We have no choice. Something strange is happening. Something ulterior is moving. Something very important is happening. I'm not purporting to be a person that lacks self-interest. I'm not like feel fear. I feel anxiety. I'm a recovering drug addict. I you know what that kind of psychological baggage that comes with. But I feel like what is the purpose here? What are we doing here? I've been shown to I've in a way lived a pretty amazing life. I've grew up in a normal background. I got super famous. I experienced all of that giddiness, all of that hedonism, found it empty and hollow, and have been returned to a position where people could actually be connected. I actually feel incredibly optimistic because of things like the ongoing agricultural protests around the world, the trucker protests, the lengths that people will go to criminalize not just an individual like me, but whole movements will be criminalized as far right, as Nazi, as whatever language is required to delegitimize the rejection of this global authoritarianism is what will be deployed. So when I say, no, I didn't think for a second about doing anything different, You know, I don't think that. I don't think like that. And it's not out of bravery. It's something beyond that, because I think, so, you know, sometimes I would like to just be with my little daughters and my wife and my son and just live peacefully. But I don't know, Tucker. It doesn't seem like there's a choice.
There isn't a choice. There isn't a choice. But, you know, even under those circumstances, some choose cowardice. And again, I've certainly seen that quite a bit. Dinage, you mentioned a person called Dinage. Can you explain what you mean by that, who this person is, and what role she plays in what has happened to you?
When you become accustomed to dealing with American politics, it's huge sums of money. It's powerful agencies that you see depicted in Hollywood movies, characters played by great movie stars. And so when you return your gaze to British politics, you feel like you're dealing with some sort of drudgery, some sort of like some like ludicrous heritage porn. Who are all these dames and baronesses and titled individuals? They can't be doing anything serious. Someone called Dame Caroline Dinage, who sounds like a Downton Abbey regular. But actually, though, Dame Caroline Dinage put forward the online safety bill. She's married to a dude that does that does military psyops, and now uses those very psyops with the domestic population. She's the person that got in touch with the social media platforms demanding that I be demonetized. They seem to have an extraordinary agenda. Like, what the term?
Wait, can I just ask you something?
Yeah.
I looked up, because I'm not as familiar with your politics as I should be.
Yes.
I looked her up, and I think what I was so struck by was that she's a member of the Conservative Party.
Right.
And that suggested to me that there isn't a choice in British politics. There's really just one party.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. It's a uniparty.
But they're not even pretending at this point.
They're not really pretending. Like, here's a sort of an extraordinary thing that appears to be playing out. In addition to just being casually informed by the legacy media that we're on the precipice of war with Russia and that conscription might be reintroduced in 2024. There was a COVID inquiry in our country, which, by the way, I don't imagine for a second would have happened without independent media reporting, without voices like Jay Bhattacharya, who was shut down, or voices like Michael Schellenberger or Berenson, people that have been shut down and vilified at large and extensively. The COVID inquiry has already cost £145 million. It's being booted off and delayed indefinitely.
Yeah, I'm with Thomas here. I think we all agree that the uniparty is basically every country. It seems like the ADF in Germany is on a dramatic rise, obviously tied with the agricultural, the farmer protests and stuff like that. But I personally really don't know that much about British politics, but it seems incredibly boring and incredibly insufferable. And from down south in America, again, we have the uniparty here. That's a fact. Canada seems the same way to a degree. I think these sort of European parliamentary systems, they seem like they're a little bit more stuffy than American politics. But again, we have the exact same problem in the U.S. We have a dramatic uniparty, and even the people that we think are defending us are part of the uniparty, and that's where, you know, it's really just whether are you actually a nationalist or are you a globalist? That's basically the final point in politics, because the social issues. I mean, look at the conservatives in our country. Other than, did you guys see the guy in Oklahoma? Did you see the man that wants to ban porn and make it a federal offense? And he's openly a pro-Christian nationalist. The media went wild with that one. He was a subject of an attack by the New York Post or the New York Times, one of the two, maybe both. But yeah, I saw somebody say the farmer protests in Europe are getting wild, really wild, as the French usually do. I saw one of them covering a government building in manure. We need more of that here. That's the one thing about Europe that I wish we had more in the U.S. is actual protests. The trucker convoy in Canada was one of the few actual protests in North America. But in Europe, you know, what's going on in Germany and France, and what happened in Holland, those are real protests. We don't have anything like that in the US right now, even though we have a lot of people that are armed.
Definitely, but at least until after the general election. Like many countries, there's an election in our country this year. But as usual, is between two neoliberal, what you might term centrist parties that are ultimately dominated and controlled by the same concerns, where an extraordinary focus is spent on the tiny, minute differences. But it's the party nominally of the left is ultimately a centralist neoliberal party.
Yes.
The party nominally of the right is a neoliberal centralist party. They may quibble about some issues that seem significant, and certainly those issues are stoked and amplified. But neither party will say, we are going to have a thorough investigation into what went on in that pandemic. That clearly was a lab leak. It looks like it was a bioweapon. It's been concealed. The people that we entrusted with our response to that pandemic are likely explicitly linked to the leak in the first instance. These kind of stories are never told. There are no legacy media organizations that worked in conjunction with one another to attack me, evidently, and by their own reckoning over a series of years. They are not conducting investigations into Epstein Island. They're not conducting investigations into the nature of the pandemic, how it was funded, where the money went, where it came from, the efficacy of lockdowns. Where are these investigations?
Even the fabled Times of London?
The fabled Times of London.
Such garbage.
So again, obviously we're not here to promote Russel Brand or anything, but you do notice a difference in his rhetoric, right? Whatever you think of him in his degenerate lifestyle previously, he does believe in a God that's not himself. He made that explicit, and he'll make it explicit again here in a few minutes. He is pretty aware of many of the things happening. And I can't help, as I did a stream before, I think all rabbit holes, when you really go down them, they ultimately lead to Jesus Christ. And it ultimately leads to a reevaluation of Christianity. And hopefully that's what's happening with Russell.
So there's nobody and pardon my ignorance, I'm peering in from the outside, but there really isn't any big media organization in your country that's even trying to answer the question, what was that? Where'd this virus come from? No one's doing that.
Do you know one of the things that I find terrifying about becoming more educated about this space, Tucker, mostly by listening to more educated voices than my own, is that many of the things a person might instinctively feel, such as you feel like, yourself, forgive my ignorance, I don't know much about British politics, but the way that one might intuit, hey, should we not be provoking Russia into a war? Don't they have nuclear weapons? Should we think very carefully about that? I mean, how much do we want Ukraine in NATO? And do we even need NATO anyway? The kind of things you might think if you didn't go to university, if you're a regular blue collar person working for a living, maybe in the police force or the fire service or as a nurse or as a teacher, something that gives real value to your nation, the kind of things you might think, they're true. Those ideas are true. And in order to prevent you from reaching those ordinary everyday regulations, a machine is put to constant work to conquer the space of your attention, incessantly and relentlessly, filling your mind with dumb ideas and dumb distractions, making you believe that some sugar or a screen might be a convenient palliative as your children are marched off into an unwinnable forever war. We've been thinking lately before, with the Houthis and stuff, I'm being deliberately glib. But it's like you go from not ever having heard the word Houthi to being invited to hate the Houthis. Oh, the Houthis, we've got to hate the Houthis now. And you realize, just to move a battleship into that region, think of the taxpayer dollars. And it's not as if the Pentagon are going to be passing an audit anytime soon and telling you where this money is actually going. And $2 trillion was spent on Afghanistan. And if you think of the before and after picture of Afghanistan, oh, well, thank God we spent that $2 trillion because before Afghanistan was, and now Afghanistan is. It's very difficult to fill in those sentences, isn't it? And so what I'm saying is like your sort of easy dismissiveness of what British politics amounts to is probably right. Two corrupt parties pursuing the same ultimate end, keep people tyrannized, keep people distracted, keep them turned on one another over minor issues that will not ultimately affect their lives or the lives of their children, so that the agenda of the powerful can be pursued without opposition.
War, the economy, public health, food supply, water supply. I mean, these are the energy. These are the things that matter. And they're the things that are never discussed openly, ever.
Why can't we have conversations about that? With the global farming protest, it's not accurately reported on. When it is, it's reported on with a particular accent and always with the insinuation that farmers have suddenly moved their attention from the raising of crops to racism now. The farming's more of a hobby. I've got to return to my true love. That's having strong views about varying ethnicity. There's no question that a rise in nationalism is an understandable response to rampant globalism. But the ongoing sort of finger pointing and condemnation of ordinary people I identify with, I recognize it because I grew up in those communities. Professional metropolitan people don't like working class people, don't like ordinary people. And now they've found a way to legitimize their hatred. Oh, they're all disgusting. They're all racist. Look at them in their MAGA hats. Look at them with their white vans and their flags. Look at them with their perspectives, with their unearned views and their belches and their beer. It's a kind of legitimization of a loathing of the people that are most connected to the nation, people that, generally speaking, a couple of generations ago were asked to sacrifice the lives of their sons and daughters for the idea of nation, an idea that they're now being told doesn't exist. For me, what we need to see is an emergence of a different type of populism that transcends the boundaries of left and right. These things are happening organically and naturally anyway. And what I think is happening is that perhaps it's odd, isn't it? Because the internet is ultimately a creation of the military. Clearly, they didn't accurately understand that whilst it was going to be a brilliant means for control, and clearly that's one of the wars that's being fought now, it is also a tool for informing and awakening. And I think that we're...
So far, again, whatever you think about Russ, I know many of you guys can't stand his voice, noted, but he's right so far in regards to the forever war, the attack on the middle class, the working class. As I said, in regards to the evil agenda at hand, it's totally trying to destroy any sort of middle class anywhere, whether it be in Europe or the United States. Again, if you're a millennial like me, good luck trying to own a home. Good luck trying to get a mortgage. Good luck. I mean, you got to make six figures at this point. It's ridiculous. There is no middle class at this point, and that's what the goal is. And you know, and the utilization of the internet, that's one of the reasons why I think there's going to be a grid attack, and they're going to take down the internet, and we're going to be forced to get on the Starlink system. And I think that's what the move is. I've said this before. I'm going to say it again. This is again why Elon Musk is one of the biggest portrayers of evil, even though it's not like explicit like some of the other people. Is I believe what's going to happen is the internet's going to get shut down, whether through a grid attack or whatever it may be. And we're going to then have to log on to the new internet, Starlink, with your digital ID. And that's the only way you're going to be able to get on the internet. That's personally what I believe. And so I think that, yeah, obviously we know DARPA, you know, these military industrial complex, they came up with the internet. I think it kind of got out of hand. It shifted the narrative too much. They see that this is making it very difficult to control populations globally because of the interconnectedness of media. And I think that Elon Musk with X, as I said before, it's not about free speech. It's about data. It's about mapping global discourse. It's about putting a data set behind Grok. It's about putting a data set behind Neuralink. It's about looking at what people are interested in if you're in various countries in different parts of the world. It doesn't matter. So I think personally, the internet, as we know it, it's over. And it's only going to get worse. Censorship's only going to get worse. And I think eventually they're just going to take it down. We're not going to have access to it in the same way. I'm not sure how it's going to happen, but this is one of my speculations, purely speculation here. I'm just purely speculating. But I think that it's very likely we're all going to have to get on the Starlink internet, and that's going to be centrally controlled. And you're going to have to get on it through your digital ID, which is going to be part of your digital passport, your digital medical record, and your banking system. It's all going to be tied together. And I think it's going to happen in the next few years.
We're at this crux point. Which way is it going to go? Are people going to wake up to the reality that we are being confronted with, or are we going to sort of nervously cling on to the idea that somehow through comfort and panaceas we might hold on to some old life? Increasingly, I think, is over. I watched some of that speech you did in Ottawa or wherever you were in Edmonton, Canada, and two of the things I thought were important is knowing that you are not God. You are not God. It's not a...
You know, I'm highlighting this comment by Thomas. And Thomas, I apologize. No hard feelings, brother. I did not actually mean you're a retard. I appreciate you still being here, my brother. God bless you. But I totally agree with you because I saw this exact same thing when I was in California at Berkeley. The professors, the students, they come from these, whether they were economically poor and they were, you know, able to get it because of the lowering of standards or whatnot, or because they fit a diversity quota, or the people that came from, you know, wealthy families. Almost the entire professorship, the administration, they despised the middle class. They despised with the flyover countries. It was so common in Berkeley that everybody, makes jokes about the flyover states in the United States. And you look at, remember the response. I don't know if you guys saw the map, the response of states that supported sending National Guards and stuff to Eagle Pass. I think that is basically the breakdown of leading towards civil war. That's how the country is going to split. You have the blue states on the coastal system, and then you have basically Chicago controlling Illinois. And I think the rest of the country is basically on the same page, and the people in power absolutely hate us. And I totally agree with Thomas, because when I was at Berkeley, it was the exact same thing. And they openly hate white Christian men that come from the Midwest. Like I came from that. So I experienced like people literally scoffing and making jokes to your face about it. And that was an eye-opening moment. So I appreciate you, Thomas, because that's exactly what I saw.
About you have to have some purpose in your life. And secondly, people must relearn a connection to their land. Our connection to our lands has been broken. Now, many countries, particularly in a post-colonial world, have complex relationships with their land. Sometimes that is a relationship with a land that had inhabitants prior to our arrival, or the arrival at least of settlers in your country, for example, or in Canada that you were describing, outlining. But we are divorced from nature. We are divorced from our lands. We are divorced from one another. And we are fed such an empty, hollow, vapid, phatic diet of lies. And you said at one point, oh, you should, this is this vast country. You could all have 6 acres each.
Yes.
And I felt like, the crowd responding to that. People are frightened of the people of Britain, or the people of America, or the people of Canada, or Australia, or the people all over the world. For surely those Pharma protests are happening in Sri Lanka. They're happening in India. They're not just happening in Europe or Anglophonic countries. They're happening everywhere. They're happening everywhere. And I feel that that's precisely the direction we need to return to. Sovereignty of the individual, sovereignty and sanctity of the connection between people and their land, maximum amount of power in your own life and the lives of your community and your loved ones. Not this transition of power to increasingly centralized forces, and this infantilization and neutralization and castration of individual and familial power.
Can I ask you a question that you may be able to answer that I've been meditating?
I'll give it a go, Tucker. I'll tell you that.
Well, you're just uniquely positioned to answer it because you've seen both sides. But so the things that the people in charge hate include nature.
Yes.
And the class of people who are most useful to your nation. You described them. Cops, firemen, teachers, nurses, all of them are crushed during COVID, by the way.
Yes.
And farmers. And it's indisputable that if you don't have those people, you don't have a society. You could get rid of every think tank and every sociology department and every liberal arts university, you'd probably be okay. Get rid of your farmers, you starve to death. So it's not obvious why the leadership of a country would hate the very people they need most and hate the most beautiful and valuable thing they have, which is nature. Why do they hate those things?
It terrifies me to contemplate, Tucker, that people like Alex Jones and, in our country, David Icke, who, aside from some views that are impossible to corroborate around quite occultist and, shall we call them, marginal ideas, difficult to corroborate ideas, when it comes to the subject of globalization and the increasing authoritarianization of our planet, appear to have been ahead of the curve. You can see them 20, 30 years ago saying with the empowerment of NATO, the empowerment of world banks and the WHO, like this is extraordinary. And it seems to me that the disempowerment of ordinary people, the condemnation, the demoralization of the public to create people that just are weary and broken and is, if not enslaved, then so dependent it amounts to a form of slavery, cannot be inadvertent. It seems to be a denial of something fundamental that in my language, I would call spirit, the right to be who you are, that there isn't something fundamentally ugly or wrong.
And this is where I go off again with Russel Brand and the trajectory towards Christianity, again, which may be in the process, but You know, I saw all these Daily Wire people and stuff, you know, saying, "Oh, he's becoming Christian." Slow the roll. He seems to be very okay with some of the with the Skittles stuff, and this is where he's gonna highlight. Well, you know, it's about just spirit and everybody being able to express themselves. But certainly there is a truth to the postmodern breakdown in culture. We talked about this in fellowship at church today. There is nothing that ties Americans together anymore. I mean, literally half the country despises whatever the American identity or the historical American identity is. Again, we all have different opinions on that based on the deists and the Freemasons that founded the country, but there are good things about it as well. And there is nothing that ties us together. Absolutely not. In this sort of postmodern breakdown, the only response is that people sort of have their own individual unique expression. But that's where it got into how I was talking about how the evil one is attacking us, is that it leads people to sort of sexual fetishes and then the destruction of their own temple and their own body, which we're seeing at mass in our society. So I don't think he's connected that dot yet. He seems to be kind of okay with it.
With you, that you are allowed to be who you are. And I see that as a universal principle that will be applied all the way from the left to the right across various ways that people claim their individual identity now. It seems to me that, yes, that if you start to attack those pivotal infrastructural roles, I was struck when speaking to some of the people that you work with, man, that, you know, that's been a cop for 26 years in New Jersey, 35 years in the security services. Like, these people that give their lives for a country. So to tell those people that your country doesn't mean anything, or to alter the meaning of what a nation is, or alter what your contribution has been, it seems to be about a kind of disorientation. And it's difficult, actually, sometimes. The reason I mentioned at the beginning of this rather corroding answer figures that are broadly condemned as conspiracy theorists, but then aren't we all these days, the reason I mentioned them is because they talk specifically about ideas to do with spirituality, morality, and ethics. And it's hard for someone like me to consider that the goals of this global establishment are anything other than power, finance, dominion. But when you talk about this loathing of nature, whether that's human nature or botany or the great expanse, it's difficult to think that there isn't something dark, yes, at its core.
Because there's no rational explanation for that. How could you want to despoil nature? How could you hate human nature? How could you want to hurt people? Those are not rational responses to anything. I mean, there's got to be, I mean, clearly what we're watching are the fruits of spiritual war. If you can think of a better explanation, let me know.
Certainly the solution.
And that's exactly right. And that's why we titled the stream, you know, the spiritual battle of global tyranny, because it is a spiritual war, but it takes a minute for people to get it. And again, unless you have a Christian perspective, I don't think it fully makes sense. Like I told you before, one of my best friends growing up, he is not Christian, didn't even grow up in a family going to church at all, but we were getting into it, and he's been getting into the conspiracies, and he did not get the jab. And that really woke him up. He started doing some more research. He gets what's going on now. He's getting in contact with all the alternative media sources. And he basically believes in the Christian understanding of the apocalypse and what we're moving towards. And yet he doesn't have the Christian framework. And so sitting there and talking with him about theology and everything, he's, you know, again, the literal understanding of the incarnation of God is difficult for people who don't have cultivated that sort of spiritual disposition in life. But the more I talk to him, he's like, man, I basically agree with everything the Christians have to say in regards of where the world's going and what's going on and globalism and moving. And it's like, exactly, brother. Exactly. And I'm sure that's true with so many of us, the people around us. That's why I always say, as I've already reiterated, all rabbit holes lead to Jesus Christ. And even my friend who has no family disposition towards church or Christianity, just through researching conspiracy since 2020, recently, when we're able to reconnect, has basically said, dude, I don't know what's going on, but it seems like the Christians are the only one that are resisting and that they have an understanding of like where we're going. Exactly. But once you understand, then it's spiritual. Now you're finally connecting the dots.
Solution seems to me to be spiritual, and even when they're talking about ecology and evoking words like Gaia, like the spirit of the planet, it seems oddly utilitarian. The earth is a resource, even when claiming to care about the types of energy industry that might be most beneficial and those which might not be as beneficial. I don't see reverence. I don't see an acknowledgement of the sacredness of the earth. That
And I mean, no matter what you feel about Brand talking about this particularly, one of the things that I think is on point is that global climate change is being used as a totalitarian mechanism to take over the planet. We all know that. I don't think anybody in this live chat doesn't already get that. It's absolutely the case. And everybody you talk to that believes in this climate narrative, you remember, I did a whole stream on the climate narrative and showed all the predictions basically from like the 1950s forward. Not a single one has even been close. Not a single one. And as I've said before, it makes no sense why global investment firms and banks would invest in real estate on oceanfront property if they really believe everything's going to go under. Of course they don't. Of course they don't. But the fact that so many young people, have you guys seen this stuff with like Gen Zers, like having like these climate crisis where they literally believe the planet is about to end unless we basically we all get into our 15-minute cities and get on the grid and get our IDs, our digital IDs. I mean, it's ridiculous. But the global climate change is the foundation of the entire globalist pyramid that we're up against.
the earth is
Yes, I see that too. Somebody said global climate change is a slow process. I'm not saying that the climate isn't changing. I'm very skeptical of how much we're contributing to it, but anybody who even knows anything about history, you look up battles from the 1500s to the Roman Empire, climate was different. European climate in certain months were very different. Snow was occurring in October in certain parts. Like it's we don't understand that climate is constantly changing. And they don't want you to think that way because they want to utilize the fact that the climate is changing to then subjugate you.
is not a resource. It's not, obviously the left and right are classically almost at this point divided around the subject of climate change. And what I feel is who among us ought not love our planet and behave respectfully and reverentially and lovingly to our planet? And how is that going to happen if no one has a relationship with it? I think like 90% in my country, 90% of the land is inaccessible to most people. 90% of the land is privately owned. Like land that used to be commonly held is now all privately owned. There has been successive law after successive law that has moved power and control and the land and nature herself into the hands of an elite. And it's this, I suppose, even where it would have been risible.
So you're getting back to feudalism.
Yeah, let's get back to good old feudalism. What was wrong with feudalism? Why are we making such?
Feudalism was wrong because it basically created indentured servitude. And so, although I get the point of getting back to the land and working the land, which I'm all for, it is biblical to have private property. And this is part of the leftist residue of Brand, because when I did that stream 2 years ago, I highlighted that he was against private property. And I think that is absolutely what the globalists want. So he's connected a few dots, but there's still many dots that he hasn't connected yet. That's why I wanted to do this stream, is to try to connect the conversation I had about his worldview two and a half years ago to now in 2024, that he's connected a lot of dots. You have to give him that. He's certainly come around in regards to many of the things happening in the world and the globalist agenda. And his spiritual worldview is morphing, because what I highlighted in that previous stream years ago is that his entire spiritual worldview of divinity being consciousness and all this different stuff, it all led towards the globalism, towards henosis, the privileging of unity over multiplicity and plurality. But he still has a hang up on private property. And I don't get it. Because if you don't have, whether it just be a couple acres or, an entire farm that you're able to have, this creates a sense of responsibility. But when you're working it for an overlord who then can tax you and take the money, which is, again, what happened over and over and over again during these feudal systems, not so much. So Yeah, exactly. So Caravaggio agrees. He's a talented communicator. He's certainly come around on a lot of topics. We got to give him that. But he still has a lot of residue left from his lefty days. And his emphasis on the problem with private property doesn't get it, because if we move to a feudal system, the same people he's against in regards to this globalist agenda, they're going to own all the land. And we're going to be their indentured servants. We're going to be their slaves working it for them, and they can take and give us wages and give us as little as they want. So this is one of the big hangups with his worldview. I just wanted to highlight that.
Such a fuss about it. It's like the idea that you and I are people that operate on different sides of a political spectrum becomes exposed as ridiculous when the anti-authoritarian aspect of what we both clearly believe in has to become the clear and pivotal point around which all political views have to now start to coalesce. You are either going to oppose what's happening when it comes to globalization and centralized authoritarianism, or you are going to be crushed by it individually and collectively.
How do you see, and I'll stop with this compound question. How are your family and friends holding up in the face of this assault on you and your family? And how do you see this playing out, the battle that you just described? Are you hopeful or no?
You know, like because I've been subject to personal attacks, it's very one thing. Like I have a program of recovery. I've been in recovery for 21 years. It's just, in a sense, it's what enshrines and helps me practice my relationship with God. It's the most important thing to me. The thing I have to most be observant of and have to keenly avoid is descent into self-centeredness. When I am very frightened, it's very easy for me to drift into becoming quite myopic and insular. What I've observed, like in this period, from a personal perspective, is that like I'm incredibly fortunate. I've got an amazing wife. I've got amazing, beautiful children that are healthy and doing well. I've got incredible people that I work with. Like, oh my God. And another thing that's been amazing is, like, for a month, publicly, continually, I was like, called the worst names you can call a man. And then I'd go out in public and people are like, Russell, hey, we support you, we support you. And like one time I was weighing like sort of like a family with all their daughters that were aged between like sort of 15 and 19. Oh, can you do photos of us? I was thinking, if there were one group that would be negatively affected by what's just been publicly said about me, it would be the parents of teenage kids. And like people aren't buying it. People aren't buying it. That's the problem. Yeah. People are waking up. People start to think, well, Jesus, is there going to be a better example than your former and perhaps future president? The more they hate him, the more people like him. Yes. The more people like him, because what they know is they don't trust the establishment anymore. They cannot trust the establishment anymore. Well, speaking from the perspective of, look, this isn't the first time I've known personal crisis. I'm a drug addict in recovery. I'm a product of a single parent family. I'm a normal person from a normal background. But what I would say is that, in a sense, a crisis becomes an invitation. A catastrophe is an invitation. And it seems like, whether you're on the left or right, everyone believes catastrophe is coming, and it will be an invitation. It will be an invitation, because if what we are being offered is a slow grind into endless war and more authoritarianism and more control of our personal lives and our ability to worship, our ability to affiliate, our ability to pray. If what we're being invited to accept is the colonization of the self, of our ability to think freely, then what have we got to lose when all they're offering us is more war, endless pandemics that are being legislatively enshrined even now through the WHO treaty?
And I want to highlight this comment because Jesse is totally right. I don't know if you guys saw that TikTok that was basically going viral the other day. It was a trucker who was hired. He was being paid by Kraft, like the food company, Kraft Foods. And he was taking a truckload, and his destination was like an underground base or an underground, some type of federal facility, whether it be a military facility. I'm not sure. But he must have not got the memo, because he got out of his truck. He's like, hey, TikTok, look, I just wanted to show you where I'm delivering my my load at. I mean, this is crazy. Look how big these walls are. And it was showing this ginormous, absolutely ginormous facility that was underground. That it was an entire highway system, which again, we know. And he was like, yeah, it's crazy. They have train tracks. There's trains running down here. Yeah, exactly. we know what's going on. So I just wanted to give Jesse his props, because that was something that was going viral the other day. I don't know if you guys saw that.
What have we actually got to lose? I think, in a sense, perhaps they are, if there is one God, one all-powerful God, then surely that God is at work now. And surely that God is creating the perfect conditions for our mutual awakening. And perhaps what's required is the spur, the ignition of something so unbearable that people will awaken rather than endure it any further. And perhaps that's what we're being offered now. Yes, of course, it seems like we're on the precipice of catastrophe geopolitically and from various potential health pandemics, but also it seems to me like a potential offering to awaken. And I don't think we have any choice other than to see it that way.
Russel Brand, you have not been broken. You are at your very best. Your very best.
You.
And I really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, guys. So that kind of finishes that conversation. But my point in today's stream is obviously not to promote Russel Brand or think that he's going to save us with his Rumble channel. The point was to highlight the sort of cultural shift in the fact that I did a stream covering his entire worldview a couple years ago, and he is definitely in a different place. Now, some people I saw in the chat are very skeptical. They think maybe he's a paid operative. Could be. You can't trust anything on the internet nowadays. That's a fact. But when we look at him connecting, again, the WEF, some of this globalist agenda, climate change, which he used to be a big supporter of, it sounds like he still is interested in like a spiritual understanding of Earth, which is fine, because we know that God created Earth and that we then are the stewards of that creation. But he's really coming around. And the big thing that I hope you guys caught was the fact that he did say, "You are not God," and talk about an exterior God that he wants to worship and build a personal relationship with. And then you look, well, how many religions do you build a personal relationship with God? And it really comes down to Christianity because of our understanding of personhood and its relationship to the Trinity. So I think that there's some real optimism there. I'm skeptical. Again, his reluctance to support private property, I don't understand that at all. And that's not biblical. And that's totally what the globalist system that he's up against also wants. But hey, we'll take, if we get a little bit of good, it moves in the right direction. So anyways, I appreciate you all. Smash that like. Let me see if we have any super chats that came in. Checking the Streamlabs. Nope, nothing on Streamlabs. Let me check the Dono chat. Nothing on Dono chat. So if you guys want to show some love, again, what are your guys' thoughts on Russel Brand and his general trajectory here? Do you guys think he's moving in the right direction? Yeah. In regards to the underground stuff, Natashki says the FBI headquarters in West Virginia is in a mountain. Yeah, a lot of strange stuff regarding that. Thomas says that Christianity grows one soul at a time, and that certainly seems to be the case. And remember, I've said this over and over again, and Father Peter Heers has been discussing this, that St. Paisios believes that there's going to be a golden age of orthodoxy before let's say, the unfolding of the end times actually begins. And so we know that we're closer today than we were yesterday. Is it in 2030? Is it in 2050? Is it in the year 3000? We're not sure. Again, as Orthodox, we don't make claims on the date like many Protestants try to do, but it's promising. There is change. And I agree with Thomas here. And he says it's promising. Times are a changing. And I really do think that. I mean, people in my life that were not awake a few years ago are becoming more awake. And many of the ones that I notice are awake refuse the jab. Now, I know many people that got the jab have become reluctant about it and kind of opened their eyes. But the people in my life that I've talked to that have been opening their eyes more and more and more, again, maybe they were part of that MAGA Trump phenomenon. Maybe it was the jab, but there is an awakening happening. Is it going to slow down what's in motion right now? Hopefully, I don't think we should give up hope. I certainly don't think we should be accelerationists. We talked about that in one of the last open panels, talking about American Orthodoxy. I know that it's a very easy tendency for many people that have sort of been black-pilled to want to be accelerationists. I don't think that's the move. I think our salvation is tied to resisting evil. And just because we see it's evil and that it's a massive uphill battle that probably won't be won, I still think it's salvific to fight against it. And so I know that I've gone back privately with some people that are much more black pill. They think they think, well, we should just accelerate it, go ahead and allow it to happen, allow the countries to be flooded. I don't know. I think that it's I think it's spiritually righteous to fight evil, even if it's a losing battle. And even if, you're the last man on the battlefield and the entire army surrounding you, you don't give up. It's not honorable. And I think the last thing we can do is attain a little bit of honor and dignity by just resisting it and fighting it and speaking out and the live chat, sharing stuff, sharing links with each other. It's not super significant. It's not going to change the world, but it may change one person. And that's what we do as Christians. As Thomas said, we try to save one soul at a time and help people. So, yeah, Jesse says Christ is powerful. Who knows? Wicked Wally says biggest epic fail on the right in 2020. There were bail funds for leftist protesters, and we had nothing to take care of people losing jobs over the jab. That's a great point, Wicked Wally. That's a great point. You look at, again, the celebrities, and it's tied to that meta narrative that we have in the West that you can't speak out against. So yeah, we have all these people burning down cities and neighborhoods and businesses, private property. They get then Hollywood celebrities posting GoFundMe's that then go all over the internet, and they raise their bails within minutes. Meanwhile, what's the white gentleman's name that choked the guy out that was harassing people on the subway? Look at the gentleman in Iowa that's being charged with a hate crime because he beheaded the Baphomet statue. I mean, we live in upside down times, and one of the biggest problems with whatever you want to deem the right is, or right of center, is we are so isolated we can't take care of each other, and that's a huge problem. That is a huge problem with, again, right-wing politics, if you will, is we don't take care of each other. And the left, even though they're all, again, filled with demons, they do take care of each other. So I totally agree with Wicked Wally that was one of the biggest problems with 2020. And moving forward, we're still so isolated. But, that's where maybe there is some hope with this border crisis that's happening in Texas. More people seem to be waking up. Certainly more states seem to be openly critical. But yeah, I mean, what are your guys' thoughts? What do you think are some of the biggest drawbacks of right-wing politics in the West? I think one of them is what Wicked Wally's saying, is that we're not there to take care and support each other when we're fallen, when we're being persecuted by the system. So anyways, welcome all of Jim Bob's people. God bless you guys. Good to see you here. We're actually getting ready to wind down the stream, but if you guys have any questions or comments or any topics you want to discuss, feel free to send those in or make a comment here in the live chat. Guns and Glory says, what, you're not allowed to bully the devil, the bully of bullies? Yeah, exactly. I mean, you let's just face it, in the United States, it's becoming more and more of an openly satanic culture. I mean, that's a fact. And it shows you that any criticism of the satanic agenda, I mean, you are persecuted. And as I said at the opening of this stream, name a religious figure that is more mocked and ridiculed and belittled and attempted to be humiliated than Jesus Christ. Like I said, there's that Netflix documentary where they claim he's homosexual, sleeping with the apostles. We have a movie that's supposed to be coming out where it's all females. Jesus is going to be a woman and all the apostles are going to be women. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Jim Bob, shout out to Made by Jim Bob. God bless you, brother. He says a big drawback is that the focus is very political and not theological. I totally agree with that. And I would argue that that's part of the problem with Protestantism. We were talking about this in fellowship after church today. because Protestantism is so non-traditional and has no real hierarchy. I mean, the theology itself has sort of smashed hierarchy. I mean, I know mainline Protestants and you have high church Protestants, but in America, it's so evangelical and non-denominational that the tradition, the hierarchy is politics. And I think that's why you get these people that venerate Donald Trump as like some salvific figure. Now, sure, is he countercultural? Does he do things that are better than the opposition? Sure. But agreeing with Jim Bob here, Protestantism is so weak. Protestantism it gave rise to the problems that we are living in right now, that Protestants actually venerate politics because that's really the ultimate hierarchy that they believe in. And have you seen all these Protestants that literally advocate for secularism? I mean, come on. Like that's a get to Jim Bob's point. If you're advocating for secularism because you think people, that Christianity doesn't deserve a place in politics, you've totally missed the point. And you clearly don't know anything about Christian history. So I'm totally with you on that, Jim Bob. Yeah, my church says we shouldn't bring politics in the church. My church is pretty red-pilled. So we don't have, well, I have a very small parish, but we don't really get into politics because basically everybody at my parish, at least that's under the age of 50, is very black-pilled on politics, and that's why we're Orthodox. That's, again, leading to Jim Bob and my point. That's why everybody's Orthodox at my parish, because they've already done the conspiracies. They already looked into this stuff, and they know we're not going to vote our way out of it. So I don't know if this is directed at me, Natashki. She says, what part of the country are you in? I'm in Indiana. So I'm directly in the Midwest, pretty red state, very Protestant, but fairly conservative, I would say. So that's at least where I'm at in the country. Yeah, I agree with you, Zero. He says the church has always part of the state. That's how it has to be, period. Exactly. I think secularism is actually it's doomed from the get-go, and it leads into relativism. Patriarchy is the way. Absolutely. That's why. Where is patriarchy name a patriarchy in the Western world? The last one, you could make a case for Catholicism, but we see that that's being subverted very quickly. I think the only other one you could claim is Orthodoxy, and that is not going to be subverted in the near future. At least if it does, the church will fragment because there's way too many people that are aware of what's going on to allow that to happen. Yeah, exactly. Katie K says Satan is very real and his worshipers are running our country. That's a fact. As we talked about earlier, Katie K, is that I think the powers that be want our politicians to engage in a bunch of degeneracy. That way they'll never step out of line. So yeah, you can, sell out the country. You can, be a sexual deviant pervert. You can, engage in all types of crimes and drug addiction. But the point is, eventually, as long as you don't get out of line, you won't be prosecuted for it. But if you do start speaking up, now they have dirt on you and they can put you in jail. Oh, thank you very much. We got a super chat that came in from Will Need Heart. Throws in $20. Thank you so much, Will Need Heart. He says, elections are the new liturgy. Oh my gosh, that's a great point. That's absolutely a fantastic point because they are. Everybody's hope for the future is placed in these politicians. 2024 is a year of many, many political elections around the country, especially in the Western world. And we're going to see it again. Unless people wake up and realize that it's theological, that this is a spiritual battle. This is not a battle you can vote your way out of. We're not going to make any headway. And maybe it's good it's going to get worse. Maybe the fact that the country and most Western nations are going to get worse is maybe something that's going to wake more people up. I don't know. But I also know that most of the people I talk to, unless you are religious, there is no hope. Most people have zero hope for the future because they don't have a God to lean on. They don't have a real theology to have a perspective on the future. So I think without God, most people can't actually go down these rabbit holes and face it. I forget who I was talking to recently, but they were talking about one of their friends, or maybe it was their brother, went down these rabbit holes, globalism. This was back in 2023. And it got so dark for him because he was non-religious. I think he's like agnostic or atheist or something like that. He just gave up and he just decided to go along with the system. And his brother was like, man, I feel so bad for him, but he basically has no hope. And I think that's going to be a lot of people. Yeah, that's going to be a lot of people. Exactly. Agent Orange says you got to hit the bottom before you can bounce back up. That surely seems to be the case, and it seems to be the direction that we're moving right now. So I wish it wasn't the case, but that certainly seems to be it. Again, I want to give a special thank you to Will Need Heart for the $20 super chat. Thank you very much. God bless you and yours. Let me just check the dono chat. Nothing over on the dono chat. Nothing on the Streamlab. So, yeah. Without God, there's too much to fear. Exactly. It's overwhelming, but that's part of this, like the darkness surrounding us, right? We're literally up against a global tyranny. And if you don't have God, what the hell are you going to count on? Well, and this is what I always say to these, these neo-pagans, and I mentioned this to Uber Boyo, God bless him, our Nietzschean brother, is like, what are you willing to die for? And I think for the neo-pagans, it's like this weird mixture of race and I don't know, pagan gods or something. But again, they engage in all this degeneracy during their worship. I think without God, you have nothing really to die for, because God puts into order the marriage and the family and the children, and it sets your priorities. It gives you as a man something to die for, something to willingly sacrifice your life for. And if you don't have anything to sacrifice your life for, then you're going to fall victim to the pleasures that the world's offering you. You know what I mean? So I don't know. That's just my personal opinion. Kalamark says, if society is a grenade, then religion is the pin. Pull the pin, and it's just a matter of time. Yep, it certainly seems to be the case. And look at, we get to sit in hindsight. I was speaking with this today with a guy at church because they were talking about the American Empire and America and all this different stuff. And it's like, dude, look at history. Like the American experiment isn't even 300 years old, and it's already getting ready to crumble. It's getting ready to fall apart. Like go look in the history of the Roman Republic, and then after Julius Caesar, the Roman Empire. Look at the Byzantium. That's over 1,000 years. The Holy Roman Empire, over 1,000 years. We can't even make it 300 years. And people think that we're on the same status. No, the experiment didn't work. And it's getting ready to fall apart. And it's because there is no religious foundation to the Western world. And the only hope are monasteries in Eastern Europe, really. Shout out to Maggie Videos, throws in $10. Thank you so much, Maggie Videos, from your support. She says, what church hierarchy do you think is best? What are your thoughts on Go Arch? Oof. Eesh. Go Arch. Now, let me begin my response by saying it's a parish by parish thing. I've been to an OCA church and I've been to Go Arch churches, and they are very good because they have very based priests that get it, that understand what's going on in the world. But I also know that the hierarchies of Go Arch and the OCA have been very seduced by some of the cultural rhetoric. Both Go Arch and OCA supported BLM and marched with them during the protest in 2020 when they're burning down cities. El Pitaforos, the Archbishop of Go Arch, who's expected, again, this is, I don't know if I should talk about it publicly, but I will. People I've talked to in the church believe that what's going to happen is Patriarch Bartholomew, who has been doing maneuvers, and God bless all these men, right? Because we're not supposed to, chastise necessarily our hierarchs. And maybe they're doing their best, but I'm just going to state the facts, right? We know Patriarch Bartholomew has been working with Western government agencies in regards to creating new churches. That's what's going on in Ukraine right now. They're kicking out the actual church that, yes, because they're under the Moscow Patriarchate. But many believe that Elpidophoros, the guy who is basically a liberal, he's being groomed to become the next patriarch. You know, that seems to be the way we're moving. And it's not a secret that the Greek church in America is and many of the parishioners are very liberal. It's not a secret that ROCOR is one of the most traditional. And I would include Serbian and Romanian in there too. Although most Romanian churches are part of OCA at this point. The Serbs are not. I have never gone to a Serbian church that wasn't very based and red-pilled and knew what's going on. So I think the Slavic churches, there's a real split where we're seeing in regards to some of the traditionality. But I don't know if you guys saw that, you know, when Elpidophoros went to Mount Athos, the monks, according to Orthodox news, the monks did not let him into certain monasteries because of the things he's supporting and what he's doing. That is good. If you guys saw that the hierarchy in the Greek church in Greece wrote a public opinion expressing their disdain for same-sex marriages in Greece. I've talked to you guys before about how Greece is one of the first countries to be attacked in Europe for these global IDs. They have to have a digital ID by 2050 or they can't participate in the economy. That's less than a year, guys. And I know people that are sincere Orthodox Christians that already said in Greece, they're not getting it. And I know due to my conversations with them that there are growing communities in Greece that plan on basically housing people and providing food and stuff and a new sort of economic commerce because people don't want to get the digital ID. So what are my thoughts on GoArch? My thoughts on GoArch is that they have some of the most beautiful churches in America. My thoughts are that there are some phenomenal priests and parishes. I think that the hierarchy is worrisome. I think that some of the things that have been happening in OCA are worrisome. I think that if I were to advise somebody that I think the Antiochian Church, I recently attended a service with New Metropolitan Saba. I've talked with other clergy. They believe Metropolitan Saba is on the right side of things. You know, so I'm in the Antiochian jurisdiction. They've had some problems. You know, our previous Metropolitan Joseph, he basically went along with whatever the CDC had to say during 2020. That was very eye-opening in regards to Orthodoxy in America because we could see how certain parishes responded versus other parishes. So I would advise if somebody was going and looking for an Orthodox church, I would recommend the other jurisdictions before an OCA or a GoArch parish. However, you have to speak to the priest because there's also very liberal priests in some of these other jurisdictions. And there's very based priests in some of the more liberal jurisdictions. So it's a parish by parish thing. But in regards to general tendencies in the hierarchy, you know, just be careful. Just keep your eyes open. You know, we're not the Catholic Church. We don't believe our hierarchs are infallible. And so these people are men just like us. They obviously have a higher burden. They're expected to live up to that burden. Some people can't. And so, you know, just keep that in mind. So if you're in a good GoArch church, God bless you. We're all Orthodox. We're on the same team. If you're in a good OCA parish, God bless you. But just be careful. Just keep your eyes open because there are subversive elements that are at work within the Orthodox Church. And many people I know are worrisome about this synod that's going to take place in 2025. And many people speculate that some of the movements that are occurring is to try to unify the Orthodox Church with Rome. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't see how it's going to happen. There's too many people that are aware. But it could cause another schism. I don't know. I am not authoritative. Talk to your guys' priests. Talk to your spiritual fathers. I'm just a guy on the internet. But yes, have discernment and be attentive. Be aware that, you know, men are fallible and our hierarchs can be fallible. But in regards to what hierarchy is best, I think it just depends. As I said, I think all the other hierarchies are pretty darn good. Just keep your eyes peeled if you're in the OCA or Go Arch, especially with LP to Foros, and especially with things that I know that have been happening in regards to OCA. So that I'll just leave that there, because I don't want to speak bad about anybody in the hierarchy. I don't want that coming down on me, but I'll just leave that there. We had another super chat come in from Travis. Thank you so much, my brother. Throws in $10. It says, just found your channel a couple weeks ago. First time watching live. Love your content. Keep it up, man. God bless. Well, thank you so much, Travis, for your support, man. I'm glad that you found it. I'm glad you appreciate the work. So thank you very much for that, Travis. But yeah, it looks like most of the people, OCA is the Orthodox Church of America, Natashki. Yeah, exactly. That Marmari, the bishop, he's a schismatic, and that's another thing. The true Orthodox Church that is in the U.S., they're schismatic. Don't belong to any of these schismatic churches. You want to belong to the historical Orthodox Church. And so I know that Bishop Marmari, he has really made the rounds and has developed quite a following on TikTok and social media, but he's another schismatic. Be aware of all that stuff. They may have good things to say, but just be aware. Just try to find good people. I know Father Josiah Trenum, good guy. Met him. Father Peter here is a good guy. Father Deacon Dr. Ananias is a good guy. His priest, Father Russell, is a very good guy. So just find good priests. Father Michael Butler is a good guy. Father Moses McPherson's a good guy. Father Turbo Qualls is a great man. So just find good priests. And if you really need to, they have ways in which you can contact some of these guys and ask them their questions. Because, I'm not clergy. I'm just an outsider. But okay, just check in the dono chat real quick. I think we're going to wrap it up, guys. Anybody have any more specific questions before we hop off here? Sign up for the NATO Ottoman Janissary troop. Yeah, thank you, Travis, for the support, man. Yeah, Gnosticism is on the rise. I don't know if you guys have been seeing the stuff on X and stuff, social media. Gnosticism really seems to be on the rise. It's like the truther movement, the sort of it's like a breeding ground between the truther movement, Christianity, and paganism and perennialism. It's like all these people are promoting Gnosticism, which is really just it's a dumb, irrational worldview once you actually ask these people, like, to actually justify or have any sort of sophistication in their worldview. John L says Gnosticism is a really bad acid trip. Don't recommend. Yeah, I don't either. All right, guys. Well, I just want to thank you all for the support. God bless you all. I will be back Tuesday evening with a stream on the theology of the uncreated light. We have an anonymous sponsor for that stream. Shout out to our anonymous sponsor. I know that they are looking forward to it. So Tuesday night, we're going to be doing a stream on the uncreated light, and potentially Thursday, I'm definitely going to be doing another stream. It may be on mass migration and cultural degradation in the Roman Empire. I've been doing a lot of research for this one. I think it's really going to be good. Oh, we had another super chat come in. Let me pull that up real quick over on the Streamlab. Our beloved tinfoil hat girl throws in $10. Thank you so much, tinfoil hat girl. She says Tucker, Alex Jones, Russel Brand are all false prophets. They have an agenda. Look to your spiritual father for life advice. Father Athanasius is a true leader and a good man. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I don't think again, if they're not Orthodox, you can't fully trust them. Now, do they say stuff that we agree with, and is it worth doing streams and commenting on? I believe it's still fruitful because the amount of views that these people are getting and their influence in society. And so Tucker Carlson, I keep an eye on because of all the boomers, right? Tucker Carlson occupies this weird niche where all the boomers are absolutely believe what he has to talk about. I think it's because of obviously his tenureship on mainstream media and especially Fox News. But I'm skeptical, as I said earlier, of all these people. They all, I'm not saying that they're nefarious or that they have evil intentions. I don't know their hearts, so I don't really make those claims about people. But that's why you absolutely agreeing with Tinfoil Hat Girl. It's why you need a spiritual father. You need somebody who knows you personally. You need somebody who's a good man, who is steeped in the faith, and they can provide you advice, because things are going to get more and more wild from this point forward. More and more wild from this point forward. Tinfoil Hat Girl, she says, I just see money. Oh, I think you're talking about the other people. I thought you were talking about me. I was like, yeah, I agree. Most people are moved by money. And it's hard to know what's going on with the system attacking people. Obviously I'm skeptical of Donald Trump is like a 90s liberal. Tucker Carlson, he's pretty soft on certain issues that I would be much harder on. And so I don't know their agendas, but I know that you shouldn't trust anybody on the internet. Don't trust anybody on the internet. That's why you need a spiritual father. Yeah, he claims to be Episcopalian, but he doesn't go to church. That's the thing. Tucker talks about being Christian and Episcopalian, but he apparently doesn't know much about Orthodoxy, because I heard him talk about Christianity, and it was basically, he described like evangelicals, Protestantism, high church Protestantism, and Catholicism. And it's like, bro, there's a better option. It's the Orthodox Church. It's the Orthodox Church. But don't trust anybody on the internet, guys. Find a spiritual father, build a relationship with them, and take your advice from them, because shit is going to get wild from this point forward. I'm just telling you right now. Anyways, thank you all so much. Really appreciate all the support. Thank you, Tinfoil Hat Girl. Thank you to Baron Strawberry, to Wicked Wally, Will Need Heart, Maggie Videos, and Travis. Thank you all so much for the support. And let me just double check the dono chat. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to be off here, and you will see me again on Tuesday. We'll be deep diving into the theology of the uncreated light, the transfiguration of Christ, hesychism, all this different stuff, and what exactly is the Taboric light. So I will be back then. You will see me then. That will be Tuesday evening. So as always, until next time, God bless.